So, have you heard the story of what happened to President Donald Trump in Turkey going back to my birthday on July 8th? I've seen this story floating around in different versions of this credible Iranian assassination threat against the president. And I've kind of been, the stories that I'd seen so far, it's been out there for at least a week or so. And the stories that I've seen so far, it was kind of like, well, this is really odd. I don't know if I want to get into it on the show. And welcome to it. It's the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. I'm your host, John Justice. We have producer Devin running the board this morning. It is primary day here in Minnesota. We'll certainly be talking about that during today's show. Policy fellow Josiah Padley will be joining us at 8:30 to talk about one of my biggest pet peeves, and that is why parents need to go and spend money buying school supplies at the start of every single school year when our taxpayer dollars go to fund education. It drives me nuts. I'm so glad my boys are both graduated, so I don't have to worry about this. But we'll talk to her coming up at 8:30 this morning. So there was a credible assassination attempt against President Donald Trump, wherein they ended up using a decoy aircraft to get the president out of Turkey, while the journalists and the rest of the staff took Air Force One, which acted as the decoy, to its destination. The operation involved switching aircraft and transponder signals to ensure Trump's safety. So I'll give you further details on this in just a moment. But I'll tell you, the instinctive reaction that I had to this was, well, what about the journalists? I mean, if this was a credible threat against the president, and they're putting him on a C-32A aircraft as a decoy, and then they're still sending Air Force One fully loaded with passengers, okay. Well, they were unaware. You'll hear in the story, they were completely unaware that there was any situation going on whatsoever. So I want to get your thoughts. The blaster line is 612-584-4565. You can email me, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. Remember, you can watch on X at MN Think Tank, also on Facebook and YouTube at the American Experiment Facebook and YouTube pages. And of course, you can listen on the MixLR app as well. And I do suggest that you listen. If you listen to the live stream, you can certainly go to americanexperiment.org and listen there. But I do suggest that you use the MixLR app. That's the cleanest, easiest way. And the podcasts are available after the show every day as well. So my opinion on the situation did change, because initially, again, my concern was, wow, what a way to go and, put the journalists in danger. I immediately thought of my friend Katie Pavlich with News Nation, because she's often flown on Air Force One as a journalist. So now my view on this changed from concern, and then I kind of went to, this is standard. This is somewhat standard protocol. So let me give you the details, but I would like to hear from you in these opening segments on the show for a Tuesday. David Gartenstein-Ross, our AI analyst and expert, he will be joining us at 8:30. So you are welcome to get any artificial intelligence related questions in now for David, and do that through the blaster line, 612-584-4565. You leave a message, just hit pound when you're done, and it gets sent right to me. So let me give you some details on this. So Trump was secretly flown out of Turkey. He was on board an alternate military aircraft because of an Iranian assassination threat. This is according to sources cited by the Washington Post yesterday in their exclusive story. The operation took place on my birthday, July 8th. I just need to note that it was my birthday. Come on. As Trump left Ankara after the NATO summit amid heightened tensions with Iran, citing officials and sources familiar with his travel. In full view of the cameras, Trump initially boarded the legacy blue and white Boeing 747 that serves as Air Force One when the president is on board. Minutes later, Trump and several aides were secretly moved from the aircraft to an airport catering truck and taken to an Air Force C-32A, a modified Boeing 757. when I read the details on this initially, I kind of didn't. I didn't land when I saw catering. I immediately thought of Taylor Swift, and for those that don't know, during her Eras tour, they would like bring her out between stages like in a catering box. So there was footage of like fans. There were footage of fans showing Taylor Swift's in the box. I was thinking Donald Trump's in a catering box. No, he was actually in a catering truck. So the larger aircraft then served as a decoy, carrying the journalists and some White House staff who were unaware that Trump was on the plane. The operation was prompted by what U.S. officials describe as a credible Iranian threat against the president. Now, Trump's actual aircraft flew from Turkey to Britain using the call sign Reach 18, doing that thing with my fingers, no idea what that means, or RCH 18, rather than Air Force One, according to the Post. The other question I have with all of this is, are we giving away trade secrets? Like, is the Washington Post exposing how we go and protect the president by releasing all this information? I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that. We know the Washington Post. They're huge fans of President Donald Trump. So the operation came the night after U.S. forces renewed the strikes against Iran at Trump's direction following the breakdown of negotiations between Washington and Tehran aimed at ending the months-long war. The aircraft transponder was switched off of President Donald Trump's plane. I'm getting looks from Devin. I mean, so here's where I landed on this as we get some comments rolling in. Did you have just out of curiosity, did you have an instinctive reaction to this, Devin?
Not really.
No concern over the journalist's safety, or
a little bit concerned, but
you got to.
I have faith that it'll work out in the end.
Yeah, you have to protect. You have to protect the president. Let's go to the blaster line again. 612-584-4565. We'll hear from a friend of the show, Joseph.
Good morning, John. This is Joe. Hey, you got to leave the journos and other people on Air Force One to make it, a reliable or credible to make it a good decoy. But the cynical side of me says, what national resource have we had an overabundance of and can afford to lose lately? Have a great day.
No, you're right. But the more that I thought about it, like initially I thought, so here was my instinctive reaction. Like, what a jerk move. That was my reaction. Not keeping the president safe. I absolutely understand the importance of doing that. But putting all these journalists at risk. But then I thought about it. And because my mind always goes to movies, I was immediately reminded of the Ben Affleck, Tom Clancy, Jack Ryan, Sum of All Fears film, wherein there was a credible threat against the president at, I believe it was the Super Bowl. I think it was in Maryland. Fictitious games. I always hate it when they do that in movies, when they have football teams where they have different names than actual football teams. It just completely takes me out of it every single time, including Dark Knight Rises. But I was thinking about that moment, and this is not the first time in pop culture in movies or television when a president had a threat and had to be run out of a room, right? Well, when they run the president out of a location, they're not going and rushing everybody else out. So like in Sum of All Fears, spoiler alert, everybody in the stadium ends up dying because the nuclear bomb goes off. So the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, this is pretty standard fare. Do journalists, I assume journalists must have to sign a waiver before they hop on, Although if you're dead, I guess it doesn't matter at the end of the day, but your families could go and sue. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth separately boarded the C-32A using external stairs as part of an effort to make the flight appear routine. Hegseth went with Trump to Britain to aboard the craft. As journalists boarded the Legacy Air Force One in Ankara, White House staff instructed them to close their window shades, according to the media pool report cited by the newspaper. The White House publicly said that Trump left Turkey aboard the Legacy Air Force One. Trump had announced on social media that he planned to use the older aircraft instead of the Boeing 747-8 given by the United States by Qatar. and recently placed into presidential service. Now, White House Communications Director did not directly address the details of the reported operation in the statement, but but defended the security of the newer craft, saying the new Air Force One is state-of-the-art aircraft that's been fitted with high-level security protocols that ensure the safety of the president and his staff. As the president has said recently, there are many enemies of America who have their sights on him and use every tool at our disposal to address those threats. A Pentagon spokesperson referred to the Post question to the White House. Secret Service did not respond to any sort of comment. So the other aspect of this particular story was that, and I saw this in a separate report, and that was that this Air Force One that served as the decoy with the journalists was not equipped with the defensive measures like typical aircraft used as Air Force One. And so what I just read there would be the White House pushing back on that. And if there's a credible threat against the president, regardless of the technical capabilities in terms of defensive measures of Air Force One, and again, speaking of movies, I'm reminded of the film Air Force One with Harrison Ford, in which that aircraft had a bunch of defensive measures. Fantastic film, by the way, but holy cow, they need a special edition to redo the end of it when, spoiler alert, Air Force One crashes into the ocean, because that is some of the worst CGI that I've ever seen in my entire life. As a matter of fact, there's a group, a corridor crew. They're these young special effects experts, and they do weekly videos showcasing CGI in films. And they did Air Force One at one point in time, and they just ripped it to shreds. As a matter of fact, I think they recreated the end of that film with Air Force One crashing to make it better than the original one was. But my point is, getting back on track, it's that I don't buy this. That aspect of the story seems like a means for the Washington Post to try to go and criticize Trump based off of the gifted 747 from Qatar that we received, because obviously Democrats got all up in arms about that issue. So it seems like this story in and of itself is fascinating from the threat aspect, from what I mentioned about the journalist being the decoy. But then the Washington Post wanted to go and take it a step further and go and say, and it's, if it wasn't for the fact that Trump took this free aircraft from Qatar, it wouldn't have been a problem. I don't think that's the case, despite what kind of defensive measures the aircraft has. If you have a credible threat against President Donald Trump, yeah, you're going to do everything you can to go and protect him. And as I mentioned, my initial thought of, wow, what a jerk move, was immediately replaced by, what else do you do? I mean, if you go and you remove all the journalists from Air Force One who know that they are putting themselves at risk, and I guess that's another part of this I should mention, is that if you are going on board Air Force One on a trip overseas, you have to understand that the president is going to be a target for any adversary of the United States. So I suppose that risk is embedded, but just a wild, wild story. You know what's a bummer? You know what the biggest bummer of this is? Well, okay, let me back up. Not the biggest bummer of the story. That would be really insensitive, okay? I'm glad the president's safe. These types of alleged attempts against his life happen far too often. We talk about it a lot on the show. So as a side note, though, this would make an awesome story. This would be an incredible Netflix story. I don't know how you would roll it in. Like, you get Taylor Sheridan of Lioness fame. The new season started, by the way. Usually I'm a proponent of when they release episodes 1 week at a time, right? Because I like to spread it out. I want them all after the first episode of Lioness this season. Anyways, you get Taylor Sheridan, who also, you're probably more familiar with Yellowstone, who also went and was the writer on Yellowstone. You get him to go and pen the script, and this could be a harrowing story. But unfortunately, because it's President Donald Trump, I just don't think we'll ever get a good version of this, which is kind of a bummer. Maybe Angel Studios or the Daily Wire Studios can go and make a film about it. There's a new Run, Hide, Fight, by the way. Did you see Run, Hide, Fight, Devin? Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
I have not seen it.
Okay. Have you know what I'm talking about, though?
I do, though.
Great movie. There's a brand new one out now. I have not watched it yet. It's Run, Hide, Fight, Jihadists, I believe is what it's called. Yeah, and it's really interesting, too, because I can't remember his name, but the star in it's not a sequel. I think they're just using the Run, Hide, Fight label to make a series of movies. The first one was about a high school shooting, for those that aren't aware. But the actor starring in Run, Hide, Fight, Jihadis, is the actor who was embroiled in controversy in the MCU. He was supposed to be the next big bad that was being teed up. And then he had some allegations levied against him, and he was ostracized out of Hollywood. He also starred in the movie Devotion with Glenn Powell, which was a really good film. So he's the star. He's the star in that movie. I can't remember his name now. You know, I'll look it up. I'll look it up coming up here in just a moment on the show. Again, the Blaster line is 612-584-4565. If you want to leave us a comment at any point during the show this morning. We actually had a comment that rolled in super early. I was already up, but this individual was up at 2:45 and left us this comment.
Hi, John. Coming into primary day, it's a good time to remind everyone that we conservatives are the adults in the room. We can't indulge in fantasies about candidates that can't win. Lisa Damas is the only candidate that talks about what she's done. Mike Lindell has made so many missteps on there that our hardest chances of winning in the general election is to vote for Mike Lindell.
You know, the most important thing today is just get out and vote, regardless of who your candidate is. And as I mentioned, you know, in these closing hours before the polls close this evening, you know, do not disparage your fellow voter for supporting somebody who you don't. Everybody has their reasons. I will. I'm still deciding on whether or not I want to do my predictions this morning. Not an endorsement, by the way. My predictions. I do have a story for the 8 o'clock hour today, talking about primary day today that we'll get into. I've written my predictions down. I'm just not 100% sure whether I'm going to go and share them with everybody yet. So I'll make that decision in the next hour and 45 minutes. So coming up, newly released Fauci documents detail just how truly sick this individual was. I will share with you the latest as our adopted senator from Wisconsin, Ron Johnson, released private messages from Fauci's old government phone. Which reminds me, when are we going to get the phone logs for Horny Her, the St. Paul mayor? That I'm looking forward to. Details on that. Speaking of vaccines, by the way, Trump has ordered a major overhaul of childhood vaccine recommendations. So I'll give you details on what that overhaul actually entails, and get your artificial intelligence related questions in on anything. I had a back and forth with David last week because during our conversation, I kind of threw him for a loop because I mentioned and asked him a question of which I did not prepare him for. Thankfully, he was quick to deliver, and he assured me he will always deliver. So any questions that you have regarding artificial intelligence, you can get those in now. 612-584-4565. Again, 612-584-4565. That is the Blaster line. So leave those comments for David. John.justice@americanexperiment.org is the email address. We're going to take a quick break. Here's some commentary. Grace Keating from the American Experiment podcast, which will be out later on today, and a policy fellow and friend of the show, Matt Dean, discussing some of the latest issues. And we will get to Fauci in the hot seat as our adopted Senator Ron Johnson tears into what he says are truly sick vaccine texts here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
By the way, the class of 2025 just posted the worst academic performance on record for a graduating cohort. But wait, that's while they earned, of course, the highest graduation rate ever. Record low academic performance. They can't read at grade level. They can't do math at grade level. The schools aren't teaching them anything, but they're still graduating in record numbers.
It's crazy. They do such a disservice. How do we expect them to be successful? We're just setting them up for failure, which is really sad.
All the special interests are represented in St. Paul. But who speaks for you? Center of the American Experiment does. Our policy fellows dig into the tough issues that matter to you and offer common sense solutions on education, taxes, crime, and energy. American Experiment is the trusted, nonpartisan voice of Minnesotans like you. We are working every day to make Minnesota a better, safer, more prosperous place. We are American Experiment. Go to americanexperiment.org to learn more.
I looked it up, and the percentage of children in poverty in Minnesota is about 10%, which is lower than the national average. So how come somewhere around a third, 33%, say, of children in Minnesota are on Medicaid if they aren't poor?
Sure, my kids are grown now, but I had 3 kids that I raised, and for us, we could make over $100,000 a year, and still our kids would be on Medicaid. If you can imagine that. That's middle class. That's crazy. And, we also as a state, I think we should really measure ourselves by how few people have to rely on the government for health care, not how many. Mm-hmm. But if you ask, Governor Walz, he'll say the more people we feed, the better. The more people on government programs, the better. And that's really how he measures the state. And we really see that in the numbers in Medicaid, which have just exploded.
Think about it. Black and Hispanic students in Mississippi perform better in reading and math than Black and Hispanic students in Minnesota. And Mississippi spends thousands of dollars less per student than Minnesota. Mississippi spends less money, gets better results, and their achievement gaps are closing, while ours are getting worse. Think about it. It's time for real education reform, so Minnesota can catch up to Mississippi. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
You have to ask yourself, how in the heck can we be spending that much more money on Medicaid? And we're really looking into that because we think a lot of that money is going to people who are dead, people who live in other states, people who are on more than one program. And you are not surprised because you've seen that on so many different programs in the state of Minnesota. But Medicaid is by far the biggest enchilada when it comes to that.
That blows my mind.
Well, if you leave the state, they still get a check for you every month. And if you are covered by more than one program, or you get married and you're on your husband or wife's plan, they still get a check unless that is circumvented. So they have sort of a very vested interest in not finding you.
And again, commentary between Grace Keating and Matt Dean this morning.
Hide, fight infidels.
Oh, that's right. It's run, hide, fight the infidels, not run, hide, fight jihadists. But, actually, no, those are 2 separate things, aren't they? I was going to say 6 one, half a dozen the other, but those actually mean 2 completely separate things. Thank you for the update on that, Andrew. And I'm just curious, have you seen it? Have you watched it yet? I do want to watch it. Unfortunately, I did not have time to go and track down what that actor's name was. So I will do so. Let's go here, though.
Breaking right now, Republican Senators Ron Johnson and Rand Paul releasing the first batch of text messages from Dr. Anthony Fauci's government iPhone. In one exchange from January of 2021, Fauci, then CDC Director Rochelle Walensky, and then Surgeon General Vivek Murthy discussed COVID vaccination and pregnant women. Fauci flags a potential concern after the second dose, writing that many people experienced, quote, significant cytokine storm and fever, and that this, quote, theoretically could be associated with miscarriage in the first trimester. Walensky responds, quote, definitely a good point, especially after dose 2. A cytokine storm is essentially when the body releases too many inflammatory signals that could cause high fever, inflammation, and in extreme cases, life-threatening illness. So this is just coming to light now, Sandra, that Fauci had these concerns. And I remember when I got the boosters, I developed pericarditis, then that went away. Then when I had the second booster, it came roaring back again. So, the body reacts differently to these things depending on who you are.
Getting into the details of this story, the Senate Republicans, and again, that was reporting from Fox News yesterday when the story broke. Fauci's old government phone has revelations that the former COVID czar was concerned that vaccines could cause miscarriages, and that was just the tip of the iceberg. Senator Ron Johnson, our adopted senator from Wisconsin, said in an interview that the first batch of texts of Fauci's old government iPhone was a clear sign that the man who became the face of the nation's COVID-19 response said one thing privately while taking a different message to the public. We tell pregnant women, don't even have a glass of wine, and yet we coerce them, convince them, and sometimes mandated them to get an experimental gene therapy as early as their first trimester. This is truly sick, and I echo his statements on that. This wasn't, you can't even pass this off as, well, we didn't know much about what we were dealing with at the start of the pandemic. You know, we learned as we went along. No, we were well into it. I mean, we had developed this vaccine, which, doing nothing with my fingers vaccine, it's not really a vaccine, as many of you pointed out, rightly so, in the middle of all the controversies going back to the height of COVID. No, this is when we already knew what we needed to know, and yet they still perpetuated these lies. Here's the question that I have. How many others were aware? How many other individuals were aware that Fauci was taking a different message publicly than what was being discussed privately? This falls in line, by the way, with so many of the rules that we have and laws that we have in Minnesota, these rules for thee and not for me, the hypocrisy that runs rampant through a Democrat, progressive, liberal laws and policies and agendas. Like, I'm reminded, talking about this, of how we open our most vulnerable, our children, to life-devastating, harmful transgender procedures and medications that will affect them for years to come, long before their brains are fully developed enough to even understand what it is that they're doing. There is no such thing as a trans child. And yet we have laws in the state that govern how a child goes and gets their ears pierced, or how old do you have to be to go to a tanning salon. Like, make it make sense. Make this make sense. We rightly talk about the dangers of smoking. We rightly talk about the dangers of drinking alcohol if you are pregnant. And yet we were mandating, forcing women to go and get experimental vaccines that we know now ended up causing bodily harm to individuals. So how many other people were aware of this? How many other individuals? Fauci was at the top of the pyramid of evil, but who else knew? And simply did nothing while this dangerous vaccine was perpetuated on the American public. That's what I would like to know. We already know how evil Fauci is. I want to know who else is evil. In the meantime, keeping with the theme, and we'll talk with David Gartenstein-Ross here in just a moment, President Donald Trump did sign an executive order yesterday, on a side note, but still talking about vaccines, directing the federal government to overhaul childhood vaccine recommendations, delivering a major policy victory to Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the Make America Healthy Again movement. The order is dubbed the Gold Standard Child Vaccine Recommendation, and it calls for reducing the number of diseases for which vaccines are routinely recommended for all children, spacing out childhood immunizations, and eventually administering the combined measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine as 3 separate shots. The order, vaccines for, under the order, vaccines for 11 diseases, and again, including measles, mumps, rubella, polio, whooping cough, would be recommended for all children down from 18 under the current schedule. Vaccines for several other diseases, including hepatitis A and B, and others, would instead be recommended for certain higher risk groups through shared decision-making between parents and doctors, which is how it absolutely should be. Trump defended the changes during an Oval Office signing ceremony yesterday, saying that they would reduce the number of vaccines administered during individual visits and arguing that parents should have greater control over when their children receive shots. It's inconvenient. It's 5 stops, but it's something that I think will have a huge impact on autism. So I wanted to make sure that I shared it with you because this is an incredibly positive thing that I can't imagine Democrats are going to be able to go and find something to criticize him for, but we also know what Trump derangement syndrome does to people. So I would fully expect that people would find a way to go and criticize President Donald Trump for this. Now, I actually have a virus-related artificial intelligence story that I'll talk about with David Gartenstein-Ross here in just a moment. Before we do that, though, I do want to bring in just a couple of comments relating to the story that we opened up the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment with, and that was Air Force One serving as a decoy because of a credible Iranian assassination threat to Air Force One. The president was put on board a C-32A and flown out of Turkey, while the journalists and the staff of the president ended up flying back to the United States aboard Air Force One as it served as a decoy, while the separate aircraft served as the president's Air Force One, even though the call sign was Reach 18. Friend of the show, Raquel, wrote in and just said quite simply, and I agree, the president has to do what the Secret Service says. He has no choice. And as I mentioned before, my initial reaction of, wow, we really put all those journalists at risk, but that would be the same regardless of where the president was if there was a threat against him at a banquet and he was rushed out of the room. And we actually saw that at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, right? All right, before we bring David Gartenstein-Ross in, let's go and hear from a friend of the show, Bob. He has a thought on this.
The attempted assassination of President Trump, the assassination of President Lincoln, the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan, all three Republicans, by the way, just goes to show you that when somebody makes changes in the world that actually work long term and that make the world a better place, they're going to face strong opposition and threats. I don't remember Obama and Biden facing.
Yeah, I got cut off there at the end, but he's right. When you have an individual who is effective one way or another, right, they end up becoming a target for individuals jealous of that power or wanting to strip away that power. I'm one of many, different aspects, but he's right. President Donald Trump certainly isn't the first to have assassination attempts or threats against him, but it does seem like he seems to be leading the record at the moment when it comes to those, unfortunately. It is the John Justice Show presented by AmericanExperiment.org. Remember, you can watch at the MN Think Tank on X, also on YouTube and Facebook at Center of the American Experiment. Download the MixLR app if you haven't done so already. You can listen to the show live there. You can always get caught up on the podcast and the videos that are posted to those platforms and all podcast platforms once the show wraps up at 9 o'clock this morning. An individual who's been with me for many, many years, serving as a counterterrorism expert, but now serves as our AI analyst and expert, joins us once again to talk about the latest in artificial intelligence and answer your questions this morning. Very pleased to welcome the CEO of Expert Theory, David Gartenstein-Ross. Good morning, David, and good to speak to you once again this morning.
Good morning, John. It's always great to join you.
So let's start here. I already have some questions lined up for you. I have an email. I have some blaster comments that have rolled in, 612-584-4565. But we were just discussing Trump ordered some changes regarding vaccines, their availability, and requirements surrounding them. We also had the story of texts from Anthony Fauci regarding COVID-19, revealing what he was saying privately versus public. And I thought we'd start here with one of the stories that I grabbed for our conversation today. Artificial intelligence has taken another step into synthetic biology, with researchers using a powerful AI model to design functional viruses from scratch, in a breakthrough that could advance medicine while raising new biosecurity concerns. Now, the synthetic viruses are not capable of infecting humans. Instead, these bacteriophages, based off of one particular virus, it means they can only affect the E. coli bacterium. In lab testing, engineered phages successfully killed resistant bacteria strains that had evolved immunity into natural occurring viruses. The doctors say that through this AI technology, they could successfully fight antibiotic-resistant superbugs and deliver targeted gene therapies. So what was your instinctive reaction to this story, David? I'm always curious sort of where your artificial intelligence expertise goes to when you see a story like this.
The main thing is that it's an acceleration of what's going on already. as you and I talked about COVID a lot, obviously, during that era. And one of the things early on that we both pinpointed was the unjust suppression of what we can call the lab leak hypothesis, that COVID may have been started in a Chinese virology lab. Now, again, without diving in that rabbit hole, but that was kind of the anchor. The reason I bring that up is because for a long time, there's been a lot of work on viruses that in part is undertaken by scientists who create new viruses in order to figure out how to counter them. And that presents both, number one, promise, right? It's good to get out ahead of new antibiotic resistant strains of viruses and the like, or new dangerous pandemics that we could confront. But number two, if it escapes into the wild, it can cause massive harm to humans. And so one of the things we're seeing with AI is the massive acceleration of pre-existing promise and pre-existing peril. Same thing is true not just of human viruses, but computer viruses. In the realm of computer viruses, as we've seen, there is an increasing ability on the part of AI-powered agents to get into, to find code errors, to exploit those code errors, and to get into different systems that hadn't been hacked previously. So that's the main thing I'm thinking about. It's acceleration of the system, and acceleration is just inherently hard to deal with.
Yeah, I guess I think this question comes up a lot in our discussions, but we talk about how quickly AI has advanced. Again, I just recall the first few conversations that you and I had versus where we are now, and which it seems like we're light years ahead of where we even started with these conversations. Yeah. But are we even capable, or is AI assisting in developing the needed sort of infrastructure and equipment to go and handle how fast AI is moving? Like, I guess I'm curious if we're making new possible discoveries and breakthroughs with AI, but we just haven't reached the technical level to go and take advantage of that yet. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think we can divide it into a technical and political perspective, right? From a technical perspective, the answer is unambiguously yes. I mentioned the ability to find code exploits and to hack into more quickly, way more different spaces that previously had not been hacked into. But also, the frontier models have allowed companies to get out in front of those code exploits, right? They'll use the same AI to look at their own code, and then you can use AI agents, basically bots, to patch your code. So that's technically us getting out in front. And when, in its Mythos model, which was one of the frontier models, meaning one of the most advanced models that hadn't been publicly released, when Anthropic realized just how effective it could be in getting into different code and systems where people had private information and that could otherwise cause damage to people, they created a coalition of a number of different companies that would work together to try to patch code in advance of the frontier models being released. So technically, yeah. In terms of politics, I mean, are politicians going in a direction in which we trust them more and expect them to make wise decisions more, or are they going in the opposite direction? I mean, just a quick look at national politics and who's winning races and the like. I mean, you'll have Congress people who are arguing that we should abolish the police and abolish private property. It's not exactly like the folks I want dealing with these existential problems. Instead, I'd rather have them in like a 1960s era time loop and like let them do whatever damage they have in a time where we can be a little bit more frivolous.
By the way, just as a bit of a preview, you reminded me. I want to let you listening and watching know that speaking of artificial intelligence and what David just mentioned regarding current politics today, with the rise of Democrat socialism within the Democrat Party, I have a treat for the audience today, just before 7 o'clock, that I cannot wait to share with everybody. That's all I want to say. But I'm very pleased, David. I will forward you what I will share with the audience when I play it at the top of the hour, because I think you'll get a kick out of it this morning. So I just want to do a bit of a preview. Yeah. So the AI Overlords, our in-house rock band, was hard at work this morning. I'll say that much. So listen, with that, let me go here really quick. I want to deviate because I want to expand on what you were saying, and I want to add an element to it. You know what interests me most, David, right now when it comes to artificial intelligence? It's the unknown. It's extrapolating the potential of what we know about artificial intelligence now and what it could possibly do in the future. And I may have mentioned this before, and this is more on an entertainment level, but certainly you can apply it to medicine as well. Like, I envision a time, David, where there will be a way wherein you could sit down, like my wife and I could sit down on the sofa, type in to a prompt on our television, I want to watch a version of Star Wars as it was directed by David Fincher with these set of actors, and it'll just create it. Or I want to watch a rom-com based off of this era, and it'll just instantly go and create this for us to watch. And again, as I say it, I think we've talked about this before, but I'm fascinated by the possibility of what AI can do and who is out there thinking about the possibilities of AI advancement and how we can take advantage of it.
Yeah, and for what you're talking about, it's already able to do that if you're interested in just reading the script and not like doing the whole production is beyond what current AI is able to do, at least cheaply, right? Like what you're talking about, I could put that together, right? Like it actually wouldn't it's technically there's not an issue with putting that together. It would take some time because you'd have to stitch together multiple videos. There's a lot of ways in which it would involve a great deal of human labor. If you actually just wanted like a script of like Star Wars as written by as directed by Quentin Tarantino in the style of Reservoir Dogs, right? So you have at the very end like this utterly gruesome, like rather than Death Star blowing up, they just go stormtrooper to stormtrooper and like in a grisly way, like kill them in sort of like, we could kind of go on about like what Reservoir Dogs and Star Wars mashed up would look like, but already you're imagining it. And like, I could actually like in less than an hour, I could actually put together a full script of Quentin Tarantino's Star Wars.
Well, when you consider, I've seen videos where people have done sort of similar versions to what I suggested. They had to kind of patch it together. They had to piece it together, but I'm curious, I wonder how many years out until what I mentioned will be possible. I know what you said right now, we're not there to create a full, 120-minute film with high production value, but we've seen 30 seconds worth of footage like that, and it's done pretty darn good. I mean, I wonder how long until it will be able to create a 120-minute fully produced movie with sound effects and score and the whole nine yards.
And so one of the ways, there's this wonderful quote about, and I'll have to pull up the full quote for you relatively soon. It's by William Gibson, who is the inventor of the cyberpunk genre. And what he'd said, this is true whenever you're living, is that the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. Like what you're talking about may or may not come to pass. I mean, the biggest limitation on what you're talking about is actually, the infrastructure of AI, right? When you look at the number of tokens that it would take, and if you look at kind of the controversy which we talked about over data centers and the like, it would be very energy intensive, very token intensive to do that. But can it be done? Yes. And could one do it today? Yes. Full stop. Right? It's unevenly distributed. It would take a bit of human labor, but like putting together a full 2-hour film of Quentin Tarantino's Star Wars, like easy to do. Like it's not, there's not a barrier to doing it. There's a little bit of a barrier to doing it well, but that would exist even in the future.
I want to bookmark because I want to have some questions that rolled in for you. I have further comments regarding some of the stories that we shared, but I want to bookmark data centers and make sure that we have a conversation maybe next week on that. I was reading up yesterday on a really fantastic angle of the in some cases, not all, in some cases, the irrational pushback on data centers and how actually these data centers, depending on where they're being placed around the United States, they're actually reviving towns that had been lost because industries have left. And so if you have a quick thought on that, but I would like to bookmark that and get into a larger conversation maybe next week, because I had not heard that angle yet. And it was really interesting, as you mentioned, the need for data centers when it comes to AI advancement.
No, I mean, let's absolutely do that next week. A quick thought is aligned with you, right? That there's some irrational fears, there's legitimate concerns. Certainly, our foreign adversaries have a hand in the mix in terms of amplifying those concerns, and there's ways to take into account the very legitimate concerns, but also do them right. Ultimately, we're going to need data centers. We don't necessarily need them in all the places where they're being proposed, and putting them in certain places would hurt existing communities. There's ways to do it in a way where we get the AI infrastructure we need without fundamentally upending the lives of large communities, and in fact by having a net positive to communities, as you talked about.
Talking with the CEO of Expert Theory, our AI expert and analyst, David Gartenstein-Ross. I had a question from a friend of the show, Teddy, that came in, wanting to know, David, if you've had a chance to read the book by Pope Leo on the human person in the time of artificial intelligence. I'm unfamiliar with this book, but do you happen to know what Teddy is referring to, and are you familiar with it?
So I'm familiar with, I believe what he's referring to is something we actually talked about on in an interview with you previously. This is an encyclical letter about so it's an encyclical can look much like a book. It's not really a book. If it's the encyclical letter that he's referring to, it is the encyclical. Just sorry, I did a quick Google search to make sure I was getting this right. But the encyclical letter is entitled "On Safeguarding the Human Person in the Time of Artificial Intelligence," and the answer is yes. I think it's a document that's worth reading. I've talked about some of my hesitations with kind of the direction of the Catholic Church. I do think that this is an area, and let me kind of clarify that just so I could foot stomp this. Generally speaking, I'm an enormous fan of what the Catholic Church stands for. Like any institution that's been around for millennia, it gets some things right, some things wrong. But historically, it's been a profoundly conservative institution, not in the political sense, but in the sense that when you have the weight of papal authority, there is a need to safeguard the institution that comes with that. I do have concerns that the Catholic Church has become much more of a contemporary rather than a timeless institution, and there's kind of a rabbit hole we could dive down on that. I do think that this encyclical is a lovely and very much worth reading document that gets into a lot of those issues that are fundamental, as we've talked about. Human dignity, what is the value of people? What is the labor value of people? How does AI human collaboration look? These are all fundamental issues where wise guidance from religious institutions is, I think, vital.
Let's go to the blaster line, 612-584-4565. A friend of the show, Mike, has left us a blast.
Good morning, John. Mike from Minnetonka. Say, when David comes on, if you could ask him Siri inquiries on your Apple phone. Depending on what you ask it now, it'll sometimes ask you if it should use AI to do the search. Why would it do that? If AI is the right way to do it, why wouldn't it just automatically use AI instead of making it into a question and waiting for an affirmative answer?
David, your thoughts on Mike and Minnetonka's question there?
Yeah, I appreciate Mike's question. I hadn't actually encountered this. I don't use Siri that often. But another thing that makes it a weird query is that Siri is an AI. Right? like it's an AI asking you if you want it to use AI, I'm like, dude, like I'm already talking to you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I thought. But Siri didn't start out as an AI, right? I mean, Siri's been around for a while, long before what we know as AI today. Or am I wrong on that, David Gartenstein-Ross?
No, Siri has always been an AI. It's just it has evolved as an AI, right? So like we get into the question of what is artificial intelligence, right? And artificial intelligence, like large language models are new, but artificial intelligence and machine learning is older. There's a difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning, but if you go back to when Siri was created, at that point we would refer to them as AI/ML, putting them together. Siri has always been able to have a conversation with you. Like you can't have a conversation, generally speaking, with a computer without it being a form of sorry, there's limits to this, but generally speaking, you cannot have a dynamic conversation with a computer, especially through voice, without there being some artificial intelligence or machine learning involved. So Siri's always been an AI. It's a way better AI than it used to be. But yeah, the answer is, and I'm gonna actually Google to make sure that my AI agrees with me. But I think that Siri has always been an AI.
We have an email that came in, john.justice at americanexperiment.org, as we continue our conversation with David Gartenstein-Ross, the CEO of Expert Theory. For DGR, I contend that AI is vastly overused and we are missing some important discoveries. The routine researchers are fine, but the deep dives are a problem. In the past, people would start to research something and then end up going down some rabbit holes. But many times people would learn things that opened the door to new ideas, aha moments, which could lead to better ideas in the future. People need base facts and some time to ponder their meaning, but AI circumvents that process. David, from Tommy the Elder, do you agree with that?
Yes, ish. I think Tommy I love this insight, and those listeners who kind of remember my background will know I spent most of my career as a researcher and analyst, and so like deep dives, finding things that are unusual and putting facts together in non-intuitive ways have always been really important to me, including now. So what I would say to Tommy, like, is that yes, I agree with him, and also there is a solution. So what he's putting his finger on is, there's different ways you can have AI do a research mode for you, and it allows you to put together, deep research papers that previously would have been time prohibitive to undertake, but it's an AI doing the research for you. It doesn't produce those kind of brilliant aha moments where it puts different things together in a really interesting way where there's suddenly a fit that you didn't see before. As a researcher, that's what I made my career off of. Those moments are everything. It's similar to, like, to me, I felt like being a researcher and finding those those aha moments was similar to a detective who was cracking a case. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, I worked with investigators, and so I understand how much goes into the criminal process or the intelligence process. But good research is so much like that. So my answer to Tommy the Elder is, here's the direction one needs to go in to be good with this tool. It is that you need to let the AI take up your time that or substitute for your time that previously would have been spent on things other than the aha moment. If in the past, if I were working on a research report that would say take 5 days to produce, maybe 75% of that time is stuff that was easily done by someone other than me, where like an intern or like a first year researcher could do a lot of it. There's 25% where the heavy thinking would go. I would tend to try to give that 75% that's more routine to someone junior to me and let them produce it and concentrate my thinking on those areas where I'm most likely to generate aha moments. Here's my answer to Tommy the Elder. For researchers, for thinkers, for people who use AI for intellectual tasks, imagine if almost your entire day could be focused on the aha moments, right? Like imagine that.
Yeah.
Like that's possible now. And I'll say as a CEO, like that's how I use AI, right? Like I use AI in drafting memos. And what it allows me to do is to focus the conversation on where that meat is that we're going to get a huge breakthrough. And it reduces the drafting time that it takes for the rest. So I think Tommy is absolutely right. And what Tommy the Elder is asking about is exactly where people need to be able to focus their time and use of AI in order to have those breakthroughs in this new world that we're in.
David Gartenstein-Ross, let's wrap on this story. I just want to get your thoughts on it here on the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment. This is probably the lead artificial intelligence story making headlines today, but the New Orleans Parish Communication District, which gets over 1,000 emergency dials a day in what is among the highest volume of calls in the country, is now routing 911 calls to an AI agent that decides which ones get bumped to human dispatchers and which get handled by the bot itself. Again, New Orleans has become the first city in the U.S. to use artificial intelligence to answer emergency 911 calls. And David, let me just add something to this. My pop culture brain, I'm immediately thinking about iRobot with Will Smith and the whole conundrum in that film wherein, spoiler alert, he comes in contact with an artificial intelligence robot who, in the middle of two automobiles sinking, determines that he had a better opportunity at survival and saved him instead of a young girl that he ended up having to watch drown in that moment. So an extreme circumstance, but it reminded me, this story here of New Orleans and the 911 calls reminded me of that film.
Yeah. One of the I remember, like, when we did the radio show together, like, you'd always ask these profound questions at the very end when we're running out of time. But I think one of the
we're good.
Yeah, I know this is one of the advantages to the move to American Experiment.
Absolutely.
Look, because this is an interview, I'm going to be definitive, and I'm going to say something that may be controversial.
Okay.
Not sure if this is good. Like, I'm not sure if in the short term this is a great idea. What I will say is, in the medium term, this is actually a great idea, right? And I'll explain why. And like, it will not make some people happy, but there's nothing you're going to be able to pick apart, which is that it's not a question. So this is good. Using AI to handle initial 911 calls in order to prioritize is good, and here's why. It's not AI versus like a good non-harried human who's on the ball and is able to do this and is able to answer right away. What we need to know is, with over 1,000 emergency calls, what is the current experience people are having in New Orleans with 911 dispatch service? My guess is it's pretty terrible, right? Like, just based on, and perhaps I'm wrong.
Okay.
But that's a lot of calls to take. AI is
David,
what AI is good at.
David, you're breaking up a little bit there, my friend.
Yeah, sorry, it's
you know what, David, let's do this.
A little bit of an issue with the
yeah, we're missing every other word. Let's do this. I'm going to go ahead and keep this in the stack for next week, so we can address it further, since we're having some technical problems now and we're technically up at the top of the hour. So let me hang on to this. I definitely want to get into it next week when we're not dealing with the technical issues. But I'll just take a moment and say thank you for joining us this morning, as always, David. I appreciate your insight.
Great joining you.
Yeah. Thanks, David. All right, again, the comment line for Blaster, 612-584-4565, 612-584-4565, if you want to go and join the show at any point during today's broadcast. You can also email me, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. And for some reason now I've lost my my camera shot over here. All right, so let's do this. Let's take a quick break. I want to get things settled as we hit the top of the hour here on the show. As I mentioned, I do have something special for you planned in just a moment here on the show. But now that we've reached the top of the hour, let's go ahead and officially kick off the 7 o'clock hour here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. And it is hour 2 in the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. Remember, you can watch it at the MN Think Tank on X, also YouTube and Facebook at Center of the American Experiment. Download the MixLR app, just like it sounds, MIXLR, if you're not already listening to the show that way. It's the most convenient and best way to listen as you are going about your morning routine. Also, you can check out the podcast if you miss any portion of the show. It is uploaded to the MixLR app every day after the show concludes at 9 a.m. Also on all podcast platforms, and the video is available for you as well. So this hour, we got a number of different stories to dive into. We're going to talk a bit as we kick off the hour about the rise of Democrat socialism and how President Donald Trump says jihadists are all over the place. Also, we have some updates on the scooter riders that took over the Minneapolis streets. And apparently there's some other commentators here in the Twin Cities that thought this was no big deal. Whatever. It's a bunch of kids riding scooters around. So what that they went on I-35 and put themselves and others in danger? Just kids having fun. Give me a break already. Next hour at 8:30, policy fellow Josiah Padley will join the show to discuss the rise in costs of school supplies for parents as their children return to school. It's the bane of my existence when my children were going to school. I do not understand why any parent has to buy any school supplies for a teacher, given the amount of our tax dollars that already goes to public education. It's being wasted on critical race theory and DEI. So that'll be coming up this morning at 8:30. I have a very special treat coming up for you in just a few minutes here on the show. You do not want to miss this. I feel like I'm overhyping it, but that being said, I feel like it's worth the hype. First off, though, President Donald Trump criticized Democrats yesterday, labeling them jihadists and communists ahead of the midterm elections. He cited candidates from countries like Somalia, including Representative Ilhan Omar, the Michigan Senate candidate Abdul El Sayed. I don't even get that. I don't care if I'm saying it wrong or not. Trump's rhetoric has escalated, portraying Democrats as a threat to the country. Well, yeah, because they are. Now, Trump had said when it comes to the term jihadists that a friend has suggested the term to him. A friend of mine called up, Trump said, recounting that the person told him, you should use the word jihadist because that's what's happening. Trump said that as an example, some candidates he was referring to came from countries like Somalia. Speaking of Representative Ilhan Omar, has previously called for Omar and another Muslim member of Congress to go back from where they came from, according to the story from Newsmax. Trump also sharply criticized that socialist Michigan Democrat Senate candidate Abdul Sayed, who is Muslim, at a campaign event in Las Vegas last week. Trump called El Sayed the hater of Jews and a hater of Israel. El Sayed has been a critic of the Israeli government. So it doesn't matter what President Donald Trump says, right? It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. The left's going to go after him. He can change his language, use different terminology, but it doesn't matter. If it's me, I just say stick with communists. I think that's most effective. I don't know if jihadists expands the argument in any way, shape, or form. I don't know if it helps in terms of letting voters know exactly who they're dealing with. I think communists does a pretty good job of that already. And as we've seen, and I'll demonstrate here in just a moment, there's growing concern for Democrats because of the socialist movement within their party and the rise of communists. That's even bringing Hillary Clinton to go and be concerned about the ramifications of the midterm elections. I'll get to her comments here in just a moment. First off, though, Senator Tim Scott, Republican out of South Carolina, said that the Michigan Democrat Senate candidate is making the GOP's path to the midterm elections easier. He says, with positions that Scott said are out of step with the voters in a battleground state. And this is pretty clear when you consider that these radical communist candidates, now some of them are open about it. That's mostly when they get into elected positions of power. I have an example about a socialist council member for the Minneapolis City Council, who's just straight out espousing communist values and talking points. The candidates tend to go and tone that down because they know that there is a large segment, thank the good Lord Almighty, that still is turned off by those labels. Now, Scott, talking with CNN, said, I'm certain that Abdul El-Sayed is making it easier because he is inconsistent with Michiganders of either side of the aisle. By the way, he's someone who wants to defund the police, defund ICE, who wants to abolish our concept of the border. Republicans have stepped up their attacks against El-Sayed, with GOP ads describing him as the most dangerous candidate in the Michigan Senate race. Scott pointed to El-Sayed's own past, a description of himself as evidence Republicans should take him at his word. I want to replay a comment from yesterday because I think it's partly why you have candidates like Michelle Tafoya here in Minnesota, who we had yesterday on the show. If you missed it, be sure to check out the podcast. Again, available on all podcast platforms and on the MixLR app, or watch the replay of the video of yesterday's show on Facebook and YouTube for Center of the American Experiment. But Scott, recently talking with CNN over the weekend, mentioned how he felt that the Senate race here in Minnesota was in play because of Michelle Tafoya. Here's what he had to say.
When you look at these red states, particularly that, you say they're not in play, but they're all close. Do any of them keep you up at night?
No, I tell you what, not much keeps me up at night, to be honest with you, Manu. The one thing that gets me excited when I think about this election cycle on the map is Minnesota. I think Minnesota, we have a real shot with Michelle Tafoya. She has done a really good job on fundraising. You spend money there? We just did an event for her. We've done 2 events for her recently, one in the state and one a national call for the donors. What we know without question is she is within a point of the lieutenant governor right now. So if we can continue to let her show the contrast between the 2 candidates, I think Michelle Tafoya is the kind of Republican that can win.
You think you'll pick up seats?
I think we could have a 54-seat majority.
Okay.
Not 46, not 53.
By the way, Scott pointed out to CNN regarding the Michigan Democrat and Socialist Senate candidate, saying his own past description of himself is evidence that Republicans should go and take him at his word. And he's right. So going back to Trump, again, Trump can use jihadists, use communists, use socialists, because a lot of individuals are not buying into this. They don't want that here in the country. And even Hillary Clinton came out and said Republicans' anti-communist messaging will be a very effective attack heading into the midterm elections. Clinton warned Democrats that the party must find a way to unite behind progressive candidates and appeal to independents after Saeed's narrowly defeated the Representative Haley Stevens in that Michigan Democrat Senate primary. The real fight will be, how do we make sure that people who voted for Haley feel comfortable voting for Abdul El-Sayed? See, they have to deal. Listen, they made their bet in it. They have to lie in it. But Hillary Clinton's even recognizing, this might be a bridge too far for most people. It's not just about Michigan, she said, but the Republican message is communist socialist. It's going to be a very effective attack. And so people on the left have to be prepared to answer that and be effective in answering that. You know, what she's worried about is Hillary Clinton is concerned that not enough of the broken and brainwashed Democrat voters have consumed the communism Kool-Aid.
country club pier, they're passing notes in blue, talking party colors like they're overdue. The old brass on the wall keeps asking what went wrong, but the new crew smiles soft and hums a borrowed song. Now the table's turning slow with a polished, patient glow. Everybody in the room feels the courage start to grow. Come and get some Kool-Aid, sipping by the poolside. Communism Kool-Aid, say it with a straight face. Voters in the cool shade, passing cups around the parade. Communism Kool-Aid, and nobody knows what to say. Hillary's by the phone with a careful, worried look, reading every headline like a line she didn't book. She sees the banner shift, she hears the easy cheer, and the whole old playbook starts to fog up in the rear. Now the table's turning slow with a polished, patient glow. Everybody in the room feels the courage start to grow. Communism Kool-Aid, sipping by the poolside. Communism Kool-Aid, say it with a straight face. Voters in the cool shade, passing cups around the parade. Communism Kool-Aid, and nobody knows what to say.
It's the AI Overlords on the John Justice Show, presented by American
The
Experiment.
marina keeps on shining while the arguments roll on. One side calls it progress, one side says the game is gone, and the tide keeps washing in like it owns the whole boardwalk. Smile State magazine bright while the dinner circles tall. Communism Kool-Aid, sipping by the poolside. Communism Kool-Aid, say it with a straight face. Voters in the cool shade, passing cups around the parade. Communism Kool-Aid, and nobody knows what to say. On the surface, heavy underneath, gentle as a summer wave rolling underneath the teeth. Easy on the surface, heavy underneath, gentle as a summer wave rolling underneath the teeth.
Communism Kool-Aid here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. And thank you to the AI Overlords and to my wife, Melinda, for the inspiration. Coming up at 8:30 this morning, again, we're going to talk with Josiah Padley about the rising costs of parents having to purchase school items for their children. There's a new piece available at AmericanExperiment.org that I would highly encourage you to check out. But Josiah will be joining us on the sofa here in the American Experiment studio coming up in a little over 1 hour from now. Next on the show, Minneapolis City Council member Robin Wansley criticized MPD as a major drain on the city's budget, citing its high overtime costs and liabilities from racial bias and excessive force. She's endorsed by the Democrat Socialists of America. She's showing her communist roots in her commentary. She argues the city should prioritize public safety metrics over staffing levels and opposes cuts to programs serving marginalized communities. Of course, the city of Minneapolis is facing a budget shortfall exceeding $30 million, which is where all of this commentary is stemming from. I'll give you details on this story next. But ahead of my conversation with Josiah Padley about school supply costs, remember, there is a fantastic series available at AmericanExperiment.org hosted by American Experiment podcast host Grace Keating. And they actually recorded some new episodes, which will be up soon. But Grace, over the course of the past few months, has been highlighting what has been coming to classrooms here in Minnesota. Here's a sample of what you can expect in the series, and details next on the Socialist Council member slamming the Minneapolis Police Department on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
In this week's episode of Coming to a Classroom Near You, we look at the new requirement to teach ethnic studies in all K-12 schools in Minnesota, which must be implemented in 2026. Ethnic studies includes 3 distinct standards: identity, resistance, and ways of knowing and methodologies. The resistance standard takes learning to a whole new level. It requires students to describe how individuals and communities have fought for liberation against systemic exercises of power, and organize with others to engage in such activities. The Ways of Knowing standard requires students to understand the roots of contemporary systems of oppression and apply lessons from the past that could eliminate contemporary injustices. Within these standards are K-12 grade-level benchmarks that represent the specific knowledge and/or skill a student must accomplish. Since there is no external approval process on the benchmarks, the Minnesota Department of Education writes whatever content it wants and then distributes it to schools to teach. For example, kindergartners, 5-year-olds, will have to retell a story about an unfair experience that conveys a power imbalance, and will no longer have to describe symbols, songs, and traditions that identify our nation and state, such as the American flag, bald eagle, Pledge of Allegiance, and Minnesota state flag. First graders, 6-year-olds, must identify examples of ethnicity, equality, liberation, and systems of power, and construct meanings for those terms, and will no longer have to explain why and when the Pledge of Allegiance is recited, or provide examples of basic flag etiquette. Fourth graders, 10-year-olds, must identify the processes and impacts of colonization and examine how discrimination and the oppression of various racial and ethnic groups have produced resistance movements, and will no longer have to name and locate countries neighboring the United States, like Canada and Mexico, and their major cities. We shouldn't be surprised by these changes. The Minnesota Department of Education's controlling document explicitly states this is an intentional shift and reframing of the entire approach to K-12 social studies education used in Minnesota schools. MDE claims the 2011 social studies standards and benchmarks are deficient because they organize student learning around content. While MDE acknowledges that content knowledge sometimes plays a role, in general it intends to replace our school's current content-based approach to instruction with what it calls inquiry-based pedagogy. Under this approach, students are asked to construct their own meaning based on asking difficult questions, instead of mastering specific factual knowledge. Again and again throughout the benchmarks, MDE's central theme is clear: replacing content with ideology disguised as inquiry-based pedagogy. When ethnic studies was presented to the Minnesota legislature in 2023, it was portrayed as the study of different cultures, students seeing themselves in the curriculum, and learning honest history. But like so many other familiar terms, Minnesota's version of ethnic studies has been hijacked to apply a liberated approach to understanding our world. Minnesota students deserve a robust education that includes learning hard historical truths and frank discussions on where our country has fallen short, not one that is confined to a narrow, politicized, and ideological worldview. Recently, California rejected a statewide ethnic studies mandate because it was too divisive. How will Minnesota respond? To learn more about Minnesota's ethnic studies standards, visit americanexperiment.org/ethnic studies.
It's the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment and americanexperiment.org, where you can listen to the show, download the MixLR app, where you can check out the podcast if you missed any portion of the show. And as I mentioned a moment ago, there will be a brand new American Experiment podcast released today. And I believe it's going to be Grace Keating and Isaac who will be hosting, as Katherine Johnson is out. And new episodes of what you just heard there. I'm talking about what is coming to the classroom, what has arrived in the classroom here in Minnesota from Grace Keating. I encourage you to head on over to AmericanExperiment.org and check that out. If you want to email me, john.justice@AmericanExperiment.org. Also, leave us a blast to 612-584-4565, 612-584-4565. Comments have already rolled in, and if you want to get them in early, you're welcome to. Ahead of our discussion at 8:30 this morning, talking about the rising cost of school supplies for parents every single year. And it seemed to get, I don't want to get off on a tangent because I'll go off on this. I do not understand it. And it seemed like it got worse and worse every single year as both of my boys were going through school. And I was so glad they graduated, so I didn't have to deal with it anymore because I do not understand. Why do we need to supply our teachers with all the stuff that they need every single year when my money already goes to pay for it? So we'll get into that coming up at 8:30. Get your comments in early, either to the Blaster line at 612-584-4565 or email john.justice@americanexperiment.org. All right, let's talk about some Democrat socialists, shall we? Far-left Minneapolis City Council member Robin Wansley slammed the Minneapolis Police Department in a newsletter to constituents last week. In her letter, she described MPD as one of the, doing that thing with my fingers, largest drains on the city's budget. Well, yeah, you idiot. Of course it is. You need to provide security for the people. And unfortunately, right now, we don't have enough police officers, and we'll get into this in the story from Alpha News, to deal with the rising crime in Minneapolis, scooter gangs aside, and the amount of overtime that law enforcement is receiving because we don't have enough police officers. But let me get more to what she had to say. So again, there's a $30 million budget shortfall within the city of Minneapolis that they're trying to contend with. In advance of the budget proposal, the Minneapolis City Council members are making known their priorities for the city's spending, and Wansley is taking aim at MPD. And here's where she gets, this is the vortex of stupid, the never-ending parade of stupid. So she's endorsed by the DSA, the Democrat Socialists of America, said the city's police department routinely goes over budget by tens of millions of dollars for overtime, which has no measurable outcomes and does not improve public safety. So I am doing everything I can to maintain my composure at a comment like that. So did she support the violence interrupters? Because if you remember, those violence interrupters, the whole reason why there was a major issue with the hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars we were giving to former gang members to wear fancy pre-printed T-shirts and take to the streets of Minneapolis to interrupt violence was the fact that there was no accountability for them. They didn't have to go and show their work. They didn't even have to prove that they interrupted any violence. Again, doing that thing with my fingers. Did she support that? Yes, she did. They don't improve public safety? Yeah. Cops don't do any good, guys. They don't do. It's only people on the street armed with cell phones getting in the way of federal immigration agents that has any sort of positive effort in dealing with crime. This is the most ridiculous. Again, I'm trying to maintain my composure, and I can't because it's just that dumb. No measurable outcomes. You know, a major part of the issue here is that there's nobody around her that's taking her to task. There's nobody around her that's going, you're a communist and you're a moron. Again, I would encourage you to go and listen to the podcast last week with Becca Thompson, who is fighting for the future of Minneapolis, social media influencer. We had a lengthy conversation about the state of the Minneapolis City Council. You know, but she says these things, and then there is no retort to it. She doesn't have to go and prove her work, is what I'm trying to say. And before I get to more of the story, let me share this with you because it falls in line exactly with my line of thinking right now. So a spokesperson for one of the leading Democrat Socialists of America chapters was on a podcast, I believe over the weekend, And I'm looking at a version of the story here that was posted by Wall Street Apes on X, wherein Wall Street Apes wrote, "How do you get a leader of the DSA movement's brain to malfunction? Simply ask them to explain their talking points."
But we do believe in taxing the hell out of millionaires. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, what does taxing the hell out of them mean?
Yeah, you know, I don't have like a solid, but I think.
But shouldn't you? I mean, if you're the co-chair, of the DSA, shouldn't you be more specific than just taxing the hell out of something? What exactly do you mean?
So again, it's democracy, right? And we have to look at what we need to spend and what we need. We don't want to depend on the existence of millionaires because that means people are still getting exploited. So, so yeah, we need to look at what we need to pay for in the interim, what sort of tax base we need for that to happen, and then and build.
They don't have an answer to these questions because there aren't any good answers to these questions. Who decides that? The interviewer was absolutely correct. Just at the very beginning of the comment.
Believe in taxing the hell out of millionaires. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, what does taxing the hell out of them mean?
Yeah, you know, I don't have like a solid, but I think.
But shouldn't you?
Of course you should, but they don't. It's all style over substance. It's all emotion. It's all feelings based. It gets people angry. It gets them motivated to go and demonize and vilify a group of individuals for your own advantage without ever having to, as Robin Wansley, the communist Minneapolis City Council member, stated regarding MPD ridiculously, that there is no measurable outcomes. There's no measurable details relating to what their policies absolutely, entail. They just want to get their individuals into office any way possible. It's one thing that I wish that conservatives, that Republicans did better. I wish that Republicans could be able to elicit that type of emotion based motivation, but steeped and rooted in facts. But they don't care. All they want is the ability to go, we need to tax the hell out of millionaires, and then to have the angry mob with their torches ready to go and take to the streets going, yes, yes, go and tax the hell out of them, even though nobody can go and define what that would actually entail. Who decides that? What percentage are they getting taxed? Why are they getting taxed? Is there any looking whatsoever? And this was millionaires, by the way. No thought whatsoever of the individuals that they employ. The health care that gets provided for those individuals, the families that are raised through the employees of these millionaires and their businesses. Nope. It's all just straight up in your face, emotion-based communism to achieve a goal. And that goal is to simply grow their power. And right now they feel very powerful because they are taking over the Democrat Party. As the Democrat establishment ridiculously says, we're the Big Tent party, invite them all in. Wansley continued to slam MPD, saying the city faces a multi-million-dollar liability each year created by MPD's pattern and practice of racial bias and excessive force, as well as PTSD claims that are widely understood to be vulnerable to fraud. What a lunatic. She's just throwing out all of the fancy buzzwords. People are concerned about fraud, so let me go ahead and make an unfounded claim that PTSD money being spent to law enforcement officers, probably because those officers are having to deal with an abundance of overtime, dealing with the rise of crime in Minnesota and the fact that we don't have enough police officers. So then she just makes up this idea that, and that's vulnerable to fraud. And I know people care about fraud. You can tell how flimsy their arguments are when they have to go and resort to these types of vapid platitudes, just tossing it out there without any sort of, again, qualifying statement or facts or any examples whatsoever to what she is referring to. She says taxpayers will continue to see increased property taxes every year until the city stops rubber stamping blank checks to MPD, regardless of public safety outcomes or reform implementation. Police spending in Minneapolis has gone up significantly in recent years, according to the Alpha News article. In 2019, the city spent approximately $181 million on police. The city's 2026 budget which spent just over $2 billion in total, allocated $229 million for policing. Now, this may seem like a big increase, but the difference lines up with inflation. $181 million in 2019 is equal to approximately $230 million in 2026. But Minneapolis has far fewer officers this year than it did 7 years ago and is on pace to overspend its police overtime budget again this year. Minneapolis Man-Baby Mayor Mom Jeans Jacob Fry has said the overtime spending is necessary to meet the city's policing needs. Chalk that up to a broken clock being right twice a day. Because he's right. In 2019, the city had nearly 900 police officers. In June of this year, Minneapolis had 638 officers, with another 30 in training. And as we've talked about on the show, as social media influencer Becca Thompson did last week in our lengthy discussion about the city of Minneapolis, even if you are somewhere in outstate Minnesota, if you're among what Governor Dim Walz refers to as rocks and cows country, enjoying the good life, make no mistake, what happens in Minneapolis has an impact on you as well. Obi-Wan Kenobi in The Phantom Menace talking to the Gungans. That's right. You and the Naboo form a symbiont circle. You must understand this. If Minneapolis falls, they'll eventually come for you too. Just like the Droid Federation. Yeah, I know I'm a nerd. But you know what? I gave you communism Kool-Aid, so you got to be nicer than that. Such a jam, by the way. Minneapolis is required by law to have a minimum of 731 police officers on staff, but recruitment has proved difficult for the agency. Now, Alpha News asked MPD about its spending, but the agency did not immediately respond to a media inquiry. Additionally, Wansley was asked why she described MPD as one of the biggest drains on the city budget and whether she believes MPD should have 731 minimum officers as required by law. Now, Wansley said in her June newsletter that her budget priorities include creating a city agency to mitigate the city's legal and financial liabilities, exploring the possibility of publicly owned housing, and stopping cuts to programs that served marginalized communities. The city of Minneapolis is facing a $30 million budget shortfall specifically because of the leftist policies created by the Democrat socialists on the Minneapolis City Council, full stop. They only have themselves to blame. If you were to go and implement what Robin Wansley is proposing here, stripping away MPD's funding even more, do you have any idea of the hellscape that Minneapolis would turn into? You wouldn't have the ability anymore for self-proclaimed Minneapolis apologists like Mike Norton and others to sit back and show their photographs of certain parts of Minneapolis that are nice and that people go and visit, because I absolutely admit that's the case. The totality of Minneapolis did not burn down during the 2020 riots, but a big portion of it should. But this is the ridiculous pushback that you get from those Minneapolis apologists. They'll say, oh, Republicans and conservatives like John Justice go and cast Minneapolis as just this horrible, awful place that nobody wants to go to. And how do you explain all these events still coming here and Vikings games and the Twins and the Lynx and the Timberwolves and this restaurant where I'm showing myself riding a bike to? Hey, that's great. Tell me all the different areas that you are avoiding. How many different homeless people shooting up heroin on the streets did you have to pass by before you ended up in that location, safe and secure from the homeless encampment that was removed from one location only to scurry off into the woods next to individuals who have gone and given their money to the city by deciding to live in the city and now are worried about the drug deals and the random sex parties that are taking place in the woods right behind their backyard where there's not a fence. And if you're curious where all this came from, I have another story coming up in the stack from Alpha News that I'll share with you that details this very thing. But Robin Wansley knows this. She knows they'll stop short of these policies just enough. But make no mistake, this $30 million budget shortfall is only going to get worse under their policies, unless there's some wholesale change in the future when it comes to the elections in Minneapolis to bring in more sensible leadership. I have no expectation whatsoever that we're going to end up with a bunch of conservative Republicans on the Minneapolis City Council. I don't even think there are any running, and there have been any running for quite a long time, apart from a few mayoral candidates. But at a bare minimum, we could get a few people like Michael Rainville, who at least, while he's a Democrat and his policy solutions are not great, he's not a socialist or a communist and understands what the city is faced with. The city has been run by Democrats before, and it wasn't in these dire straits. But it's only going to get worse under this leadership. Wansley went on to say, Minneapolis has among the highest racial inequities in the country. Our police force has a confirmed pattern of racial discriminatory policing. Our residents were just targeted by federal government in a violent occupation. I don't need to go and repeat myself regarding Operation Metro Surge and how we were arresting murderers and rapists and thieves and getting them off the streets, and people lost their lives not because of ICE, but because they decided to get in the way of what ICE was doing. Cutting programs, she says, that serve residents of color and low-income residents will worsen these inequities and are a non-starter. And again, I wish somebody would go and ask Robin Wansley, listen, if all this stuff is true, how long have you been on the Minneapolis City Council? How long have the Democrat Socialists been on the Minneapolis City Council? How much worse have things gotten over the years? You guys are the ones in charge, if I'm not mistaken. You are the Minneapolis Council. You're the ones making policy decisions. No. They're scapegoating the Minneapolis Police Department to cover for their own policy failures. Let's go back to the blaster line, 612-584-4565, or you can email john.justice@americanexperiment.org.
It's difficult to get conservatives to be emotional about the truth because the emotion comes from the lie around the truth. The truth exposes the lie. The emotion comes from the lie.
Yeah, I kind of understand what you're saying, but to my point, and I've used this example in years past, but when we were working to push, when we were pushing back against Obamacare, and you guys all remember the ads of Republicans pushing grandma off the cliff in the wheelchair, or they would bring out somebody who needed health care but didn't have access to it. I always had hoped that Republicans would be able to tap into the emotional side and the stories like the Democrats do of what happens to people under socialized medicine. That's what I mean. Right. I don't want individuals making decisions based off of feeling and emotions, but we can appeal to them through an emotional means while we provide solutions that are fact-based and not rooted in emotion. I don't mean to convolute the issue too much, but that's what I was referring to. All right, getting back to the issue at hand, Robin Wansley, her communist comments pushing back on MPD. We go back to the blaster line this morning on the show.
John, good morning. Happy Election Day. I think Minneapolis could probably fix their police problem if they just arrested all the criminals and left them in jail. They wouldn't have to keep re-arresting. That's a way of right-sizing your police force because the bad guys are not on the streets doing the thing that they do all over and over again. Vote red today. Come on, Minnesota. Do it right.
To his point, looking at solutions, it's pretty simple. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that I was in some sort of position of power within the Minneapolis Police Department or within the city of Minneapolis, where I can make decisions. What would I do? Well, I would budget to make sure that we met the minimum threshold of 900 police officers as required for a city our size. First off, I'd also make sure that that number is still valid, because I think there's a question of whether or not we actually need more depending on the population size. I don't know what the flux has been as of late. Maybe we need less. Maybe people have left Minneapolis and we don't need as many law enforcement officers. So I want to get to the root number that we need, and then we just allow them to go and enforce the law. It's that simple. This isn't hard. That's what law enforcement is supposed to do. Support law enforcement. Have their back. Yes, hold law enforcement accountable if they go and do something wrong, like we always do. Okay? We already have policies in place to deal with law enforcement misconduct. But right now, what you have is leadership that vilifies law enforcement before they even go and do anything wrong, like what this moron communist is doing. They'll certainly never go along with what I said, but that's the easiest solution. Allow law enforcement to go and do their job and just make sure you have enough cops in order to go and do that. Let's go back to the blaster line. Again, 612-584-4565. That's the number.
So how do these Democrat socialists, when they want to tax the hell out of millionaires, when Democrat politicians and Republicans are millionaires? They only make $150,000 a year, but some of them are worth $50 to $100 million once they get into office. They're going to tax the hell out of themselves? I don't think so.
No, listen, and I don't even think that they know the means in which how they would go and implement taxing the hell out of millionaires. They just want to be able to go and say it. And of course, they're not going to hold themselves accountable. Of course, they're not included in that. You see, they're doing the righteous and just work, being the Democrat socialists that they are. It's the simple rules for thee, but not for me. All right, let's go on. Hear from a friend of the show, Rich. He certainly has some things to say this morning on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
Good morning, John. Rich here. So we've already taxed the rich. We've tried that in the United States once. In 1991, George W. Bush passed a luxury tax on yachts and airplanes. What did it do? The wealthy people still bought their new yachts. They just went and bought them from Italy. It caused 8,000 yacht building jobs in the United States. So it affected the blue collar workers. So the rich people didn't go without, and it caused hardship on the other fellow Americans. So I guess you could support the tariffs under Trump with that also, because you could get the rich people with taxing tariffs on those yachts coming from Italy, because that's where they went and bought them. Just a short history from some of the taxing the rich.
Thank you, Rich, on your short history of taxing the rich. I appreciate it. If you want to leave a comment, again, 612-584-4565 or email john.justice@americanexperiment.org. Residents, as I mentioned a moment ago, say the Pig's Eye closure of the homeless camp shifted that St. Paul encampment into the woods behind luxury apartments. I want to give you details on this and an update on the hundreds of scooter riders that took over the Minneapolis streets and even entered I-35 during scooter takeovers organized on TikTok. I want to say up front on the story, and we'll give you the details coming up on the show, that they need to put a stop to this now, because this is only going to get worse if they let it continue. Details coming up here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. Don't go anywhere.
If something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. We've heard over and over that wind and solar are the clean and green solution to our energy needs. Power without the downsides of fossil fuels. It sounds great on the surface, but is it true? Let's take a closer look. Every form of energy impacts the environment. Wind and solar are no exception. The only difference? You've probably never been told about their downsides. Wind and solar are both low-power energy sources that require exponentially more wind and solar farms to produce the same amount of power as nuclear or natural gas. This means greater material needs, which lead to unparalleled levels of mining, manufacturing, transportation, and construction, all of which come with huge environmental harms. The land use alone is environmentally devastating. A 1 gigawatt nuclear plant takes about 1.3 square miles. Solar, up to 75 square miles. Wind, up to 3,000 square miles. Powering the U.S. with just wind would require more land than 2 Californias. Then there's the materials. Meeting global net zero targets would require massive amounts of minerals, far more than the world currently produces. This means opening new mines, often in countries with weak environmental standards, dangerous working conditions, and even child labor. The impacts on wildlife are no better. Offshore wind disrupts marine ecosystems. Whales, for example, which rely on echolocation, suffer from hearing impairment and disturbed migration patterns. On land, turbines kill birds and bats, and solar farms destroy habitats. Then there's lifespan. Nuclear and natural gas plants can last 60 to 80 years. Turbines and solar panels, just 20 to 25. They're also not easily recyclable. So multiply the sheer number of units we'd need with their short lifespan, and you have millions of tons of material waste heading for landfills. The truth is, wind and solar aren't the magical solution we've been promised. The costs are real, the trade-offs significant. Low power, high material needs, extensive land use and ecosystem impact. Wind and solar energy production literally do more environmental harm than good. Like we said, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Learn more at americanexperiment.org/shatteredgreendreams.
The Blaster line, if you want to leave a comment for the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment, is 612-584-4565. Friend of the show, lawyer friend of the show, James Dickey, wants to chime in on communist Robin Wansley's comments, disparaging our MPD.
Hey, John, it's James Dickey. About the Wansley statement about no measurable outcomes for more police. Back in 2020 or 2021, when the Minneapolis City Council was actively cutting the police budget for their own political reasons, there was actually a racial equity impact assessment, which they have to do for city programs. And it noted that increasing the number of officers on the force would primarily benefit low-income and minority households because it would provide additional safety that they can't afford through, private security, gated communities, and stuff like that. So her own city documents, which are in the record in the court proceeding that got the Supreme Court to say that they got to have a minimum number of cops in Minneapolis, say the opposite of what she's saying.
And James Dickey highlights what I mentioned before, and that's a perfect example. You see, when statements like this get made by Minneapolis City Council members, there should be a member of the media immediately, multiple members of the media immediately going and asking for clarification and providing the facts, just like James Dickey did. You want to enact change potentially with the current communist, Democrat, socialist Minneapolis City Council, however you want to describe them. That's how you start, by accountability. She wants Minneapolis police to go and show their work. She should have to go and show her work. She should have to be faced with the facts that the facts actually push back directly on the claims that she is making. But the problem, of course, is that that never happens. You do have outlets like Alpha News and others reach out for comments, but they just simply go unanswered. They have no interest in providing the truth. The media has no interest in making any Democrat look bad, even if it's just them simply going and doing their job. We used to have a media that did that. We used to have journalists that actually didn't care about what party they belonged to, if the person that they were exposing with potential corruption or hypocritical statements, serving in positions of power like Robin Wansley, they used to not care. They cared about the truth and providing that truth to the consumer, those watching or listening to their news. But we've blown long past that in these politicized Donald Trump, presidential era. It's just gone. And James Dickey just pointed that out. Now, I wouldn't expect any of these Democrat socialists to change, but I would expect the public to be better informed of who the individuals they're actually electing into office are. And even if there's in support of those individuals, they should be made aware that the policies are completely unsustainable on top of being hypocritical. Just days after the city of St. Paul began clearing out its largest homeless encampment near Pig's Eye Park, residents of the Waterford Bay Apartments say the encampment behind their building has swelled with new arrivals. Situated between Shepherd Road and the Mississippi River, the luxury apartment building overlooks a wooded area along the river bluffs that is home to another illegal encampment. I played last week that cowardly Marxist lunatic at a St. Paul City Council meeting, sunglasses on, wearing a face covering, beanie on his head, talking about how we shouldn't, as a society, be catering to individuals who own property. We should not be listening to those individuals. That we should be more aligned with the people who are living on the streets while others live in the lap of luxury. This is what he's talking about. People who've decided to make a living in Minneapolis, to work in Minneapolis, to shop, provide tax revenue in Minneapolis, who didn't go and rent these luxury apartments just to have a bunch of drug-abusing sexual predators in the forest right behind their apartment complex. Residents submitted photos and videos to Alpha News that at first glance resemble the curbside drop-off outside an airport terminal. People step out carrying backpacks and duffel bags, some rolling wheeled suitcases behind them. But instead of heading for the departure gate, they disappear into the woods. Residents told Alpha News the uptick in activity began immediately after last Wednesday's closure of the Pig's Eye encampment, raising questions about whether St. Paul's transition plan, spearheaded by embattled Mayor Horny Herr, has merely relocated the problem rather than resolve it. Of course it did. So you know what needs to happen? You need to go in and root these individuals out of the forest. And then you keep rooting them out of their locations until individuals decide to either go to a shelter and get the help they need from professionals who genuinely know and want and have the resources to help the homeless population, and the others who simply just want to live on the streets, sucking off the government teat as best they can, putting them in a position where it's forced attrition. They can go outside of St. Paul and someplace else that wants to go and accept them. They can head down to Rochester, of all places. One Waterford resident who asked not to be identified said she has watched a flood of vehicles arriving since the city cleared the Pig's Eye Park encampment. By the way, what a horrible name. Pig's Eye. I mean, out of all the... I'm a fan of bacon just like the next person, but Pig's Eye seems like... I'm sure there's some historical reference to why they call it Pig's Eye. It's just a really weird name for a park. It's awkward when you're saying that on a show. Getting back to what happened. Passengers are dropping off their belongings before walking through a gated entrance into the river bluffs where the encampment is located. Instead of luxury living next to the river, the slogan should be pay $2,700 of your hard-earned money a month to watch homeless people pee where you walk your dogs and kids, the resident told Alpha News. To say that a lot of residents living here feel unsafe and angry is an understatement, they went on to say. The residents said the area has become increasingly unsafe just in the past 2 years. Oh, but you know what, guys? They really need to cut all that police budget. We need more violence interrupters. There is screaming and yelling all the time at night, she said. I actually started taking our dogs to the bathroom before sundown because it makes me fairly uncomfortable. She said police officers, firefighters, paramedics are frequent visitors to the area and described a series of incidents that she and her husband have witnessed. And before I get to what the witness said, this is a good example of what I mentioned a moment ago. You see, even the law enforcement officers that we have aren't able to go and deal effectively with these homeless encampments the way that they should to the fullest extent of the law because they're hamstrung by the leadership on the Minneapolis City Council. And if they were to move against their wishes, we all know what the reaction is going to be from the left. They'll just take advantage of it. But law enforcement should be able to go in and root these individuals out, and they're simply not allowed to. Again, fully staff the Minneapolis Police Department and then allow them to do the job to the full extent of the law. By the way, I'm getting several individuals who are reaching out to me. Apparently, Pig's Eye was the original name of St. Paul. No joke. That's lawyer extraordinaire Jeff O'Brien. Jeff O'Brien, if you were pulling a fast one on me, I'm not going to respond to your text. I'm just saying. But he's probably right. As a matter of fact, there's probably a blast just waiting for me to 612-584-4565 that's ready to go and confirm exactly what lawyer extraordinaire Jeff O'Brien had to say. And to my points, we go here on the John Justice Show.
St. Paul used to be called Pig's Eye, Ben from Little Canada.
There you go. All right. So, Jeff O'Brien. I trust you, Jeff. I just wasn't quite sure. But yes, as Benjamin just pointed out. So I had no. Were you aware, Devin?
I had no clue.
You learn something new every day. Oh, and again, apparently I'm the only one that didn't know this little factoid as we go back to the blaster line.
John, hey, two things. Number one, you're not going to see the local media hold any politicians accountable until there's a Republican in charge.
True.
Number two, Pig's Eye used to be the name of St. Paul.
All right. Thank you. Now I understand. And I also know why we now call it St. Paul, because living in Pig's Eye, I just wouldn't want to. Doesn't sound very appealing. But that's just me.
Hey, John, not only should we cater to property owners, we should do so exclusively. People who don't own property shouldn't get the vote.
Oh, that is so people who don't own property shouldn't get to vote. I'm not going to take it that far. I don't think that is appropriate. That's a bit on the extreme side of things. Thank you for the comments, though, to the blaster line, 612-584-4565 if you would like to leave a comment. And as mentioned, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. More eyewitness accounts of what's been taking place. I've been flashed by homeless men dropping their pants. My husband has witnessed assaults and actually called the police after someone was beat up and dropped over the fence like a rag doll. We've both personally had our vehicles broken into. I've witnessed kids in masks trying to jump over locked gates to get into our outdoor community area. Another resident, according to the resident, apartment management has been great and has worked with the Pig's Eye Police Department. See, this doesn't roll off the tongue. The St. Paul Police Department. Although Pig's Eye Mayor Horny Her, that does roll off the tongue. I will say that much. Anyway, according to the resident, again, apartment management has been great. They've been working with the St. Paul PD to try to address the ongoing problems. She said no trespassing signs have been posted, surveillance cameras installed, and patrols increased around the property. Despite those efforts, she said the encampment continues to grow and does not plan to renew her lease when it expires. With the amount of money we pay to live there, personally, I feel like these things we shouldn't have to deal with. And again, I know I was applying this to what's happening in Minneapolis, but the same thing rings true for both Minneapolis and St. Paul, because the police departments, while I think St. Paul's a little bit better off, not by a lot, than Minneapolis, they're still not able to go and enforce the law to their fullest extent because of the policies put in place by the leadership that hamstrings our law enforcement from being able to go and do the job that they want to do. Right? To the detriment of the taxpayers, the property owners, the apartment renters in the Twin Cities. Last month, city officials announced they would permanently close the homeless encampments across St. Paul, beginning with Pig's Eye. Officials described the effort as a doing nothing with my fingers, service-focused, coordinated transition plan, saying outreach workers would connect people with shelter treatment and housing rather than simply clearing the camps. Mayor Her said the goal was to minimize disruption while helping people move to a safer, more stable life, and then asking the reporter comments about her breasts and talking about her own. Okay, that didn't happen. The city cited fires, sexual assaults, Not just the allegations against Horny Her, by the way. The jokes just keep coming here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. Overdose deaths and other dangerous conditions as reasons for closing encampments. Angie, a longtime server at Obbs Sports Bar and Grill, said people who appeared to be under the influence of drugs have fallen asleep on the restaurant's patio, washed up in its bathrooms, rummaged through the dumpsters, urinated on the patio, stolen outdoor furniture, and approached customers for money. It's like The Walking Dead, Angie said. It's completely insane. Boy, you never see any of that type of footage coming from the Twin Cities apologists. They always show the nice patios with just happy young individuals enjoying their beverages on a summer day. Never this stuff. But remember, everything's fine in the Twin Cities. Any commentary coming from conservative commentators like me should just be completely ignored because we don't know what we're talking about. Yeah. Alpha News reached out to Mayor Her's office and the St. Paul Police Department for comment on residents' concerns about the reported increase in activity behind the Waterford Bay apartments and the city's transition plan. The St. Paul Police Department confirmed it is aware of the increased activity in the encampment behind Waterford Bay and said officers have been proactively patrolling the area since the Pig Eye encampment was closed. But it wasn't enclosed. They just moved to another location. This is what I don't understand. You close down the one encampment, the group of individuals went to another place, just go there and root them out. Again, none of this should be this hard. A spokesperson said the department continues to work with the city and its Homeless Assistance Response Team, or HART. Clever. Code enforcement officers engaging individuals living at the encampment, while patrol officers monitor the area and respond to calls for service. Mayor Her's office, of course, did not respond to an Alpha News request for comment during the time of publication. Alpha News also reached out to the Waterford Bay Apartments for comment, but did not receive a response either. Color me not shocked.
Hey, good morning, John. Bruce from Shakopee. Yeah, Pig's Eye used to be the name of St. Paul, but with all the stuff that's going down around there now, it might be appropriate to change the name back to Pig's Eye. Anyway, have a good day.
Thank you for the comment. Good to hear from you, Bruce. Again, the comment line is 612-584-4565. Again, 612-584-4565 if you want to leave a comment at any point during the
Why wouldn't you want to be a police officer in Minneapolis? All you would do all day is drive around giving white people parking tickets. Anything violent, you call the violence interrupters. Any criminal activity, well, you're just too busy and they're probably Somalians and you can't arrest them. So it's probably the easiest police job on the planet because all you can do is give white people parking tickets.
If you'd like to leave a comment as we head into the third hour of the show, 612-584-4565. And it is the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment. You can listen at americanexperiment.org. Also on the MixLR app, that's where I would encourage you to go and download the free app. You can also take advantage of the podcast as well. Watch at MN Think Tank on X, also on YouTube and Facebook at Center of the American Experiment, where all the shows are posted after the show wraps up at 9 o'clock. If you missed any portion and you want to watch back the show. Coming up in about a half hour from now, policy fellow Josiah Padley will be joining us on the couch here in the American Experiment Studios to talk about the rising cost of school supplies for parents sending their children back to school. It is one of the biggest pet peeves that I have. And so we're going to get into the details about how the prices are going up once again for parents having to purchase those supplies for the teachers. If you want to comment on that, we already have several that have rolled in. Again, email john.justice, Jon, by the way. I think I need to mention that. I haven't mentioned that in a while. Jon, john.justice at americanexperiment.org, or you can leave a comment as well at 612-584-4565. All right, before we get into some Minneapolis scooter takeover action, I do have a couple things that I want to get into, including the latest regarding the flock cameras. Before we do that, though, let's go here. I don't have a good place to attach this audio clip, so we'll just throw in some random audio that I discovered yesterday. I have two different clips for you. First off, you friends of the show are certainly familiar with They Them Energy. There is an extended version that I found yesterday of They Them Energy. So for those that aren't familiar, this was during some event, and I want to say it was happening during the various ICE raids across the country, Metro Surge here and other parts. And there were a lot of events that took place. And even so much so where they had speakers and artists showing up. There was a woman, at least I believe she was a woman. She got up on stage and she sang the They Them Energy song that we're all familiar with, right? Okay, so what I wasn't aware of was the fact that there's actually a longer video. So I have that. There's not much more to it, but it just made me laugh yesterday, and I figured for you fans of They Them Energy, you would get a kick out of the extended version and the portion of the video that I had not seen until I discovered it yesterday on X.
They Them Energy. They Them Energy. They Them Energy. They Them Energy. This is a public service announcement. Anyone dressed in androgynous outfits. This is a sweet and friendly reminder that you are safe here. Show off your binder.
So if you caught that, she says, this is a public service announcement for anyone dressing androgynous. I had a hard time hearing what she said at the end, but be thankful that I just played the audio. And if you're watching the show this morning, that I didn't play the video because it was at the end when she lifted up her top. And let me just say for the sake of argument that she could definitely take advantage of the NutraWave program like I have. I just want to say that up front. Speaking of which, right now, if you're looking to drop the weight and to keep it off for good, the NutraWave program, NutraWave.us, is the best program to do that. Listen, I've been through other weight loss plans before, and I went through the yo-yo dieting process. That absolutely went away with the NutraWave program. So prior to starting the new show here at American Experiment, I was going through this program. And within about 40 days, I lost 22 pounds. And then I went back to my normal eating habits, except my eating habits weren't normal anymore. It had changed my relationship with food. It's not even a part of the program. Just through the process of the program, my relationship with food changed, and I was able to keep the weight off. And because it was so successful, I decided to do another round of the program, and that's what I'm doing right now. Because I know that another round of this program is going to get me to a point where I will be the right weight for an individual my age and my size. And as my cardiologist told me recently, after I told him that I went on this NutraWave program, of which he was 100% in support of, there's no shots, there's no pills. He said it was one of the best things that I could do for me and my heart, because one of the best things that you can do for yourself is to drop that weight, because it takes all the pressure off your body. 31,000 people across the metro have tried everything else, and NutraWave is where they got their life back. Right now, you can get an almost $300 value. This includes a Truth Metabolic session and a red light therapy session on top of it. And you can get this for free. Now, there's only a few spots available. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain except all that weight back. So call 952-952-8685. That's 952-952-8685. Or go to NutriWave.us to get more information. Again, no shots, no pills, just results. There's absolutely nothing like it. Individual results may vary, and if you need any of that information, again, all you need to do is reach out to me, John.Justice at AmericanExperiment.org, and I'm happy to go and share that with you. All right, one more clip that I wanted to share that I came across yesterday that I didn't have a story attached to. This was a video that was posted online. I've never heard anybody do this yet, and I hope this doesn't become a trend. But the woman in this video, when talking about LGBTQ issues, has decided to go and take LGBTQ and turn it into its own word.
These liberal lesbians actually are on our way to drop that daughter off at Sleepaway Camp, at Camp Highlight, which is a camp for children of LGBTQ parents or children who identify as LGBTQ, It's an amazing, amazing camp, and she's headed there now, and we're really going to miss her because we love her.
Yeah, you heard that correctly. Instead of saying LGBTQ, she was saying LGBTQ. LGBTQ, you're not saving any time. You're not saving any time at all by saying LGBTQ.
These liberal lesbians actually are on our way to drop that daughter off at Sleepaway Camp, at Camp Highlight, which is a camp for children of LGBTQ parents or children who identify as LGBTQ, It's an amazing, amazing camp, and she's headed.
LGBTQ is not a thing, and it needs to not become a thing. All right. Minnesota cities are now reconsidering the use of their flock cameras due to public concerns about privacy and surveillance. North Branch has paused its contract while Isanti County Sheriff's Department will move away from the system after the trial period. West St. Paul and Columbia Heights have also suspended or ended their contracts with Flock, according to a Fox 9 story. This is what I don't understand. And we talked about this at length on the Freedom Friday show last week, which I definitely encourage you to go and check out. But why is it that there was nobody in charge at the city level when they implemented the trial? Like if it's a trial run and you're using the Flock cameras in a trial setting and you're going to make a decision at the end of whether to keep them, that's one thing. That I understand. That's the right thing to do. But why is it these other areas, there wasn't anybody within city leadership whatsoever that was drawing the same concerns that the public did? I mean, this is actually a good example of, public comment periods in some cases, of which I'm not usually that big of a fan of. But in this case, it seems that you could avoid a lot of headache, time, and dollars spent if you had somebody in a position of power from the get-go that was calling out, hey, there's some privacy and surveillance concerns about this, and perhaps we shouldn't go and spend this money putting them up there. No, instead, what do? We just go and we put them up there. We wait for the public to respond, outrage to ensue, and then we go and take them down, wasting everybody's money. I feel like there's a means in which you could tackle this issue beforehand so you don't get to this place where we are now, where suddenly you have these municipalities that are going and actually taking down these Flock cameras. I had a couple of comments that rolled into the blaster line based off of last hour's conversation and the Pig's Eye homeless encampment moving. I want to go ahead and share them with you from the blaster line at 612-584-4565 on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment this morning.
Hey, John. Del here. Never forget, St. Paul was the first city in Minneapolis that would cut deals with, let's say, gangsters that would come to St. Paul. The deal was you could hang out here as long as you register with the police department, and they would not turn you over to the feds. So in a way, we were a haven way back then for people who were illegal. Thought you might like to know that.
Yeah, and how many individuals, I mean, again, whether it's Minneapolis or St. Paul, how many individuals are costing the city money because they're taking advantage of city services? All right, let's go and hear from a friend of the show, Tom, who is in Pig's Eye.
Hey, John. Tom from St. Paul. Hey, I live over by that Pig's Eye crap hole. All they do is spread out in the morning, go to the corners, beg for money. And if you ever notice, every time you see them on the corner begging for money, look around. You'll see a liquor store. That's why they don't want to go into no housing, because they have to stop their alcohol and drug activities.
Yep.
And they never will. Have a good one, John.
Yeah, listen, that goes back to what I said before. You take the same way we should with illegal immigration. You take a forced attrition approach. You continue to enforce the rule of law. You root out these encampments as they start. You close them if they've grown too big. If they move to another location, you go in and you move those individuals out of that location. You just keep doing that until you've whittled down the group to where it's no longer viable for the individuals who have no desire to go to an actual shelter to seek the right, correct help, because a lot of them, for that very reason, like he said, they don't want to have to stop using their drugs or drinking their alcohol. You have other individuals that just want to live on the street. And then those that genuinely want help will be put into a situation where I want to stay here in Minneapolis, so I'll go ahead and go to these shelters and get the help that I need and stop using drugs and alcohol. That's how you go and handle this problem. You don't cater to it. That's not compassion. That is not the compassionate thing to do. The compassionate thing to do is to hold people accountable. And we're going to need to do the compassionate thing when it comes to these young idiots hopping on scooters and taking over the streets of Minneapolis. Because if we don't stop this now, it's only going to get worse now that these groups of individuals who have no regard for the law, who don't care about the city of Minneapolis, who are not positive contributors to the city of Minneapolis, see, oh, hey, we have a new way where we can go and get our, excitement, our jollies on the weekend by taking over downtown Minneapolis on scooters. And then, unfortunately, you have, fairly prominent commentators here in the area who are saying, this is not a big deal. Nobody was harmed. It's not a big deal. I'll keep my car, I'll actually go and ride a Lime scooter today. I'll show just how this isn't a big deal at all. Hundreds of people riding electric scooters and bikes descended on downtown Minneapolis over the weekend for scooter takeovers, clogging streets, circling intersections, and in some cases, riding onto I-35W. But it's not a big deal, everybody. Who cares? Despite the size of the gatherings and what police described at times as doing that thing with my fingers, reckless and disruptive behavior, authorities reported no crimes or citations. The riots took place on Friday and Saturday night and appear to have been fueled largely by invitations and videos circulating on TikTok. Some, including WCCO radio host Jason DeRusha, characterized the downtown rides as largely harmless fun, pointing to a lack of reported injuries or arrests. Others criticized the riders' behavior as dangerous or disruptive, particularly after a portion of the group entered I-35W. Part of the problem in Minneapolis are commentators that ride this middle-of-the-road stance, and they don't take one really strong stance one way or the other. Yeah, that's a bummer. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, and I'm entitled to go and disagree with it and think it's stupid and contributing to the problem. Friday night's takeover began with an invitation to a couch Lime scooter party at Nicollet Island Park. The invitation encouraged participants to bring your own couch, bring your own fully charged Lime scooter. I don't know where the couch comes in. Okay. Well, maybe it's in the story. Videos circulating. Oh, excuse me. Let me back up. Lime is a shared electric scooter and e-bike rental service available in Minneapolis and cities around the world. Videos circulating online showed large groups of riders moving through downtown Minneapolis, at times circling intersections and riding past police cruisers. While many participants rode rented Lime scooters, the group also included people on personal e-scooters and e-bikes. Other footage showed riders taking the event's couch theme quite literally, traveling through the streets on couches and even recliners balanced on couches. There it is. Oh, but it was largely harmless. Just kids having fun. What's the big deal? Hundreds gathered near U.S. Bank Stadium before setting off through downtown Minneapolis. Event organizer Johan Vargas, 20 years old, told CCO that he organized the scooter meetup and promoted it on TikTok. I just started seeing more and more people. I don't know where half these people came from, but all of them said they saw the TikToks. I was expecting maybe like 200, not 500, not 500 to 1,000. But I mean, I'm glad everyone came out. They all had fun. I mean, that's what this is all about. That's right. It's fun to go and ride your Lime scooter onto I-35 and put yourself in harm's way, and the residents of Minneapolis in harm's way. That's the best. Let's go back to the blaster line, 612-584-4566.
Morning, John. Alex Duck River. Speaking of the downtown scooters, you see Jason DeRush on X just downplaying it like it wasn't a big deal, and he's happy to see a bunch of kids riding around together and having a good time. And then, they went out on 35W, and then he was kind of backtracking for a second there when he was getting torn apart online. But he's a effing idiot as well.
Tell me how you really feel, Alex, and thank you so much for the comment. Getting back to the Alpha News story. Saturday night's ride eventually moved beyond the Minneapolis city streets. The Minneapolis State Patrol told Alpha News that approximately 11 troopers from across the metro responded around 10:40 p.m. Saturday after receiving a report of the large group of Lime scooters entering I-35W. The city estimated 200 to 300 scooters came from the witness reports, not an independent State Patrol count, according to the State Patrol Public Information Officer, who said the State Patrol does not have an independent estimate confirming that number. Jennifer Creer, Lieutenant Jennifer Creer of the St. Paul Patrol Public Information, said the riders entered southbound I-35 from South 4th Street and exited East 17th 11th Avenue South. By the time the troopers arrived, the group had already left the freeway and returned to the Minneapolis streets. Yeah, what harm was done, guys? And he just went on and off the freeway. I mean, what's the big deal? We protest on the freeway all the time here in Minneapolis. State Patrol received no reports of crashes, thank the good Lord Almighty, or injuries, and no reports of motorists having to stop, swerve, or take other evasive action because of the riders. Still, Creer described the group's presence on the interstate as, with my fingers, extremely dangerous situation, and warned that a repeat could result in citation or arrests, and it should. There's nothing safe about a large group of scooters or bicycles entering an interstate, Creer said. Motorists are traveling at highway speeds and cannot reasonably be expected to anticipate or safely maneuver around a large group of vulnerable road users in the roadway. You know, there is a part of me, like, I'm glad these individuals, these kids, aren't on their Black Mirrors. Like that's the one aspect of it. There's a middle ground here. What they did is incredibly dangerous and stupid. And if it happens again, law enforcement needs to move in and put a stop to it immediately, or else it's just going to go and get worse. But at the same time, also, I'm glad that they found this on TikTok and decided to get off TikTok and get out and actually go and do something. You know what it is, Devin? They need to do Fast and Furious rules. Remember the Fast and Furious guys in the first movie? It was illegal to go and race on the streets, so what did they do? They did race wars out in the desert, where they would go and compete out in the desert where it was legal and sanctioned, where they could still get their dopamine and their adrenaline rush, but not doing it on the streets of Los Angeles where it was a danger. See, I'm just solving problems left and right here.
I love where your mind's at.
Thank you very much. May have broken the record for movie references this morning, though. I'm not sure if somebody's keeping track. There's got to be somebody keeping track, right? A John Justice movie reference tracker. On second thought, don't do that. It is a luxury of having the new show here at American Experiment, by the way. State Patrol is encouraging Minneapolis officers and scooter companies to discuss implementing geofencing technology similar to systems used in other metropolitan areas to prevent scooters from entering restricted areas. You know, hey, listen, who knows? Maybe Jason DeRusha over at CCO can turn this into a bit, and he can lead the next scooter rally. He could be right there at the front of the line. In a statement to Alpha News, Minneapolis police said that they were aware of the gathering involving hundreds of scooter riders who traveled in a large group through downtown and southeast Minneapolis on Saturday night. MPD monitored the group and its movements, which at times were reckless and disruptive to traffic. Still, no arrests were made and no citations were issued. Police did indicate that they could take additional steps if similar gatherings were to continue. They will work with appropriate city resources and scooter companies in an effort to regulate where and how these scooters may be operated. Just be careful, though, because you don't want to shut down the scooters if they have the ability to do like right in the middle of the ride. Can you imagine? Like 1,000 Lime scooter riders, and they just turn them all off, and they all just wreck. Would make a great visual, though. The weekend scooter takeovers may not be the last. In a TikTok video, Vargas said he is planning similar events at the Mall of America and the Minnesota State Fair. By the way, we do have an update, and I want to get to this on the show today. State and Ramsey County are suing. Speaking of the State Fair and gangs, these ones aren't necessarily scooter gangs. These are Somali gangs. There's concern, and they're suing to keep Somali gangs from the Minnesota State Fair. I'm not exactly sure how they are going to go and implement doing that, but we'll give you details before we wrap up the show today here at American Experiment and AmericanExperiment.org. Coming up in just a moment, I'm very pleased to welcome to the couch Josiah Padley. She is a policy fellow here at Center of the American Experiment. Has a brand new piece, new pencils and papers. Parents plan to spend more money on back-to-back school supplies this year than last. It's one of the biggest pet peeves that I have. We will dive in to her story. Also a response from a policy fellow here, Katrin Wigfall, coming up in just a moment on the show. But as I mentioned earlier today, the AI Overlords, the John Justice Show house band, very busy this morning. And we're also inspired, in this case, by the I-34 scooter gangs in Minneapolis from over the weekend. Again, you're listening to the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment. It's the AI overlords and Scooter take over here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. I was just telling producer Devin that I'm going to have to be careful. Well, you know what? With the show format that we have here, we have the luxury of, spending more time than we typically do as the advertisers hop on board. We're incredibly thankful that we've got NutraWave up on board. Remember, you've mentioned me talk about it before. NutraWave helped me lose 22 pounds. I'm doing another round on the program right now. 13 years NutraWave has been providing a solution to your weight loss problems with no pills and no shots, just losing the weight and changing your relationship with food in the process. Right now, you can call 952-260-1965, 952-260-1965. Limited spots available for you to get an almost $300 value just by finding out what the program is all about. It's a free red light therapy session, a truth metabolic scan. So call and mention the word strike to 952-260-1965, and you can take advantage of this amazing program. Also, NutriWave.us. Individual results may vary. But because we have the opportunity to sort of do more on the show, I do have to find ways to take breaks here and then as we get more advertisers on. So I thought, you know what? Let's appeal to our AI overlords. Maybe they can help us go and fill that gap. And they've done some bang up work this morning. So I just consulted, speaking of AI, I asked, why do parents have to pay for children's school supplies? Public school budgets, this is what the AI overview was. Public school budgets rely on tax funds that are usually meant for large costs like teacher pay, buildings, and electricity, leaving little money for everyday items. When budgets fall short, schools ask families to buy materials so classrooms have enough pencils, paper, and cleaning wipes to function all year long. This is one thing that I do like about artificial intelligence, is that there is a bias embedded in it, but you still do get a much more straight answer than you will certainly any politicians. With that, I want to welcome into the show policy fellow here at American Experiment, Josiah Padley, has a brand new piece out. New pens and papers. Parents plan to spend more money on back-to-school supplies this year than last. Good morning, Josiah. Thank you so much for joining the show this morning. I greatly appreciate it.
Hi, John. It's so nice to be with you today.
Before we get into this, I want to talk about your piece, your thoughts on this. As I've mentioned throughout the show this morning, it's one of the biggest pet peeves that I have. We give so much money in taxes to go to our public education system, and yet it seems like every single year we see a story like this of the increased costs to parents of having to go and purchase these supplies. Before we get to that, though, let's get to know you a little bit. How long have you been working here at Center of the American Experiment, and what brought you here to American Experiment?
Okay, well, that's a great question. My background's actually in teaching. So I spent a few years as a classics teacher. I taught in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I taught Greek, Latin, and ancient history. And I just had a great time doing it. Loved teaching, loved the kids, but I really wanted to do something that put my political science degree to use. I wanted to do something that had a little bit more writing to it. And so I had the opportunity to move to Minnesota and to work for American Experiment about a year ago. So I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary with American Experiment, I want to say in about a week or so.
Well, congratulations on that. And now that I know, and the listeners know a little bit more of your background, let me back up even further into this. What is your overall perspective on this issue? And I'll just provide you mine. So my boys are thankfully both graduated. I have a 24 and a 19-year-old. But I can tell you that every single start to the school year, I would, head in, especially in the younger ages, to meet the new classroom, to bring in the school supplies. My wife, Melinda, would go out shopping for these supplies. And every single year, I just was scratching my head going, why are we having to go and purchase all of these school supplies when our tax dollars, as I mentioned, should be going to cover these costs? I don't want to disparage teachers because I'm not putting the onus on teachers, but what is your overall perspective on the issue? Was this something that you dealt with when you were teaching?
Yeah, well, I think that the short answer to what you're saying is that it's sort of a tradition that parents buy their own children's school supplies. And there's a practicality to it there. If you have a child who is going to have individual flashcards or an individual notebook that they're going to personalize and make their own, it sort of makes sense that that's the property of the family and the property of the household. But I do know that there are some affluent private schools, for example, at the private school that I taught at, that will allow parents to purchase a school supply box. And so that's sort of considered part of your materials for the year. And so the school actually provides that as sort of a luxury service to parents. But you are right that in the public schools, in charter schools, and in many other different types of private schools, that's something that parents have to do on their own.
I have and so I'm glad you brought up that angle, because like I don't have a personal issue, or I don't have an issue with purchasing the items for my kids, but it seems like it's gone well beyond that now. It's you're buying further supplies for the teachers in the classroom that aren't even just for your children. That's where my problem has come into it. Not so much buying them for just your own individual kids. That's completely understandable. But it seems like the push in the public school system is not just purchase items for your kids, but for everybody. Have you had some experience with that as well, Josiah?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly heard of that occurring. I think that typically, depending on the school, there are schools that will ask parents to buy more than is necessary. But there are other schools that are very careful with what they're asking students to purchase. So, for example, I looked at Anoka Hennepin, which is the largest school district here in Minnesota, and I looked at Adams Elementary School, which is a pretty diverse school. About half of the students in that school are on free or reduced lunch, which is a marker of poverty. And when I looked at their third grade supply list, I didn't feel as if they were asking for anything excessive.
Okay.
You know, it was a box of markers, a box of glue sticks, a box of pencils, a box of papers, that kind of thing. Now, you may be saying to yourself, does my third grader need a whole box of markers? You know, maybe they just need the red or the green or the blue or whatever. But no, I didn't see, at least in my review of Adams Elementary and other elementary schools in Anoka Hennepin, that students were given these large lists of, say, 4 boxes of markers or 5 boxes of markers, things like that. Now, I do think that what we often see, instead of it being on the school supply list, is we'll see emails go out from teachers or administrators to parents that say, if you have the ability, please bring this into the classroom as a classroom donation. And I think that you are right to point out that whenever we have to rely on donations, it's a sign that perhaps our school budgets are stretched in ways that we wouldn't prefer. But I'll also point out that I think that the generosity of parents who are bringing in, you know, Kleenex boxes or extra markers for students who need things in their child's classroom, I think that generosity is really worthwhile.
Yeah, I think there's a balance there. You know, society's perpetuated a lot of this. When you head into the back to school year, you can't go into Target or a Walmart or any large department store without seeing back to school supplies all laid out, you know, in front of everybody. It was my experience that it appeared as if the situation was getting worse and worse every time we went, where we were having to require purchasing more and more, well beyond what our child needed. Getting back to your piece, again, talking with Josiah Padley, policy fellow here at American Experiment, it seems as if we get the story every year that the cost of these supplies, regardless of whether or not you're buying it for your kid or for the rest of the classroom, it is going up, and certainly is going up this year too, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So talk a little bit about the fact that the price tag doesn't necessarily reflect the school supplies either. It goes well beyond the school supplies, right?
Yeah, so there's lots of different angles here. And I'll start off by saying that in my piece, I'm mostly working through a 2026 PwC survey. And so in this survey, PwC asked families what they planned to spend in back to school shopping. And the whole number they got was $922, which is shocking in my opinion. And they said about half of them, or 47% of them, plan to spend more than they did last year. Now, there are several pieces to this, because that $922 number isn't actually just your markers and what we think of as like school supplies. It also includes things that are sort of nice to have, like you want new clothes, or you want new shoes, or you want a new football uniform, or whatever. And, you know, sometimes those are needs and sometimes those are wants. Like I would say a new laptop is oftentimes a want when you're talking about an 8th grader. So when you pull that number down, the PwC survey found that parents plan to spend about $122 specifically on school supplies. And when I looked at Adams Elementary School, I looked at their third grade supply list. And, the fanciest thing that they had on that list was corded headphones and a pair of tennis shoes. And I think every third grader probably does need that. When I looked on Amazon, just to do a quick review, putting in nicest items I could think of, the Elmer's glue, the disappearing purple,
Sure.
the good stuff, that runs about $155, which is actually above the PwC's national average number.
Wow. I want to go to the Blaster line. Some comments have rolled in as we continue our discussion with policy fellow here at American Experiment, Josiah Padley. And again, the Pease parents are planning to spend more money on back-to-back school supplies this year than last. And there's actually a subsequent piece written by our fellow policy fellow, Catherine Wigfall. We'll get to that in just a moment. But let's go to the Blaster line at 612. 584-4565. Justin left this earlier this morning here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
John Justice, this is Justin from Zimmerman, Minnesota. Say, here's another thing that'll get your blood boiling about the school supply stuff. I work in the trash industry, have for many years. Most of those schools and most of those teachers throw away all the excess at the end of the year. Dumpsters are completely full of school supplies that haven't even been opened or used, just to get new stuff for next year.
I hear anecdotal stories like this, and I have in the past when we've had these types of discussions on the show. And again, they're anecdotal. This may not be a systemic issue across all the schools, but there are certainly things that happen. But all of it, typically goes and underscores, and it's something, Josiah, that you mentioned earlier. And that is the fact that we just need to be doing a better job of budgeting across the board when it comes to our education system. I'm with you. The generosity of parents, and I saw it every single year at the start of the school year, was clearly there. People are more than happy to go and help, but it does raise that question of where else is money being spent where it could go for necessities like this. What else did you discover when you were researching your piece about this particular issue? I know you cover the generosity of it as well, but you also mentioned that parents in some states may see their bill for after-school activities also disappear in the future. Correct?
Yes, that's exactly correct. And I think this kind of gets to the major point of better stewardship is needed when we're thinking about our school system, because I think that, we don't want markers to be thrown out at the end of the year, and we also don't want money to be thrown out unnecessarily. So there's something that is actually new on the horizon for parents to be thinking about. It came about through the one big beautiful bill. Sorry, lots of B's there. And it's something called the Federal Tax Credit Scholarship. So what the Federal Tax Credit Scholarship is it is a new type of tax write-off that has been created. It is a $1,700 tax credit whenever parents or community members or anyone who has $1,700 or up to $1,700 donates to a scholarship granting organization. And so that's just a tax credit, which is a great thing for some people to have. Now, what those scholarship granting organizations are is they are organizations that have to give those funds to students who are at least at 2 different schools, at least 10 students, and those scholarships go to both public and private and charter school students. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, what does a public school student need with a scholarship, right? But what that is that's a scholarship that can go to after-school tutoring. It can go to certain types of special education needs. It can go to after-school activities. So, you have your football scholarship, your drama scholarship, your choir scholarship, all kinds of things like that. And so the possibilities are really endless for this with a state that allows scholarship granting organizations to operate. Now, unfortunately, Minnesota will not be allowing these scholarship granting organizations to operate because it requires a governor opt-in signature. And so far, Walz has refused to opt in. Now, I'm hopeful that whoever is in the gubernatorial office next year will opt Minnesota in, because I think this is just an easy win. We have seen so many states opt in all around the nation. We've seen Republican states, Democratic states, and we've seen lots of advocacy from both red and blue education organizations to try and get states to opt in. And so that's really my hope for Minnesota, that we don't leave this money on the table. So actually, we've done an analysis, or sorry, other organizations have done an analysis of how much money Minnesota might be leaving on the table.
Mhm.
And if just a small percentage of potential donors donated to these scholarship granting organizations, that's up to $400 million over a 3-year period.
Yeah, and that's significant.
That is significant.
Could make a huge difference.
Yes, and for schools that are oftentimes suffering under lots of unfunded mandates, suffering under just budget crunches that get worse and worse with inflation and the cost of living going up, this is money that could be a huge lifesaver, especially to arts programs.
We're going to talk with Josiah Padley here, again, policy fellow at American Experiment. For a few more minutes, I want to go back to the Blaster line, 612-584-4565. And friend of the show, Chuck, has a comment to make based off of this discussion.
Hello, John Justice. This is Chuck from Green Isle. I was born in the middle of last century, and when I went to schools in the late 50s, all the 60s, and all the 70s, we always had to provide our own pens, pencils, and notebooks to write on, and had to do it every year and replenish them throughout the year as it came along. So I don't know what the big deal is. Parents should provide for their children, and they should work with them each day at home on reading and writing and arithmetic. But today is today, and things are different, I guess.
I think that's the big takeaway, is that today is today, and things are absolutely different. I imagine back then the education system was a lot more streamlined and simple, and we were more focused on the reading, writing, and arithmetic than a lot of what we deal with today. In your experience as a teacher, I'm curious, is there an aspect of it you miss, or what were some of the biggest points of contention that you might have had, and anything that may relate to what the research has shown you based off of the price of school supplies here in Minnesota?
You mean experiences I like just teaching in general?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, I think the most delightful thing about teaching is interacting with the students.
Yeah.
And one of my majors was classics. I'm a big classics nerd, and so it was just such a gift to get to immerse myself in the classical world, in the Greek and in the Latin, with students who actually really cared about it. Because here's the dirty little secret: you really don't take Greek or Latin unless you care about it.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Yeah. So I got a little bit spoiled because I don't think every teacher has that experience.
Do you miss it?
I do miss it. I love my job now. I really enjoy writing. But I miss my particular students.
Yeah.
But they've all gone on. They're all in college now, because I was teaching high school.
Okay.
And so I get little contacts from them every so often, and they all seem to be doing quite well.
Now, obviously, through your work here at American Experiment, you're focusing on these issues. I'm just curious, of the current education system. Like, what are your overall thoughts? If you could, if you were to return to teaching, what concerns would you have in getting back into the classroom and having students back in front of you again?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that it really depends also on what type of school you are teaching at. The experience of a teacher at a public school is going to be very different than the experience of a teacher at a private school, or even certain types of charter schools. And I will say that it is a time of significant need in our country for there to be good teachers who have strong characters and who are willing to educate students in their heart and their mind as one, And I think that one of the significant concerns that I would have if I went back into the classroom, especially if I was teaching in the public education system where there is not as much flexibility, is whether or not you would have sufficient administrator backup. One of the things that we've seen constantly, and one of the things that I've had many conversations about in the context of being a policy fellow here at American Experiment, is that there are many teachers who desperately need administrative backup for things like school discipline. If you have a student who's causing classroom evacuations constantly, do you have an administration that's going to get that student the support they need and remove them from the classroom? Or do you have an administration that's going to say, evacuate the classroom till they calm down and then go back in it, and then evacuate it again and again and again and again? Do you have an administration that's going to hold the line whenever you give someone a poor grade? Or do you have an administration that's going to say, hey, you need to raise that grade a little bit so that mom and dad aren't mad at us and we don't get sued? There's a lot of things that administrators have to protect teachers from. And what we see in national surveys and what I hear in my anecdotal experience is that oftentimes those things aren't being done.
Talking with Josiah Padley, again, a policy fellow here at American Experiment. And one of the things you can expect if you go to AmericanExperiment.org, and we've been highlighting this, especially with the Wrong Track Minnesota campaign going on right now, highlighting those 5 things that are irrefutable. They are backed up with data, the difficulties that we're dealing with, which includes a lot of education issues. But it goes beyond that with what the policy fellows here at American Experiment write. Your piece, talking about the rise in school supply costs this year. There's a subsequent piece from Katrin Wigfall where she goes even deeper into what you had laid out in your original piece. And again, for those that are looking at further information, your article is a great starting point. And then follow that up with checking out Katrin Wigfall's piece. Save your receipts, back to school shopping now, taxes savings later, correct? What will people discover within Katrin's piece, dovetailing off of your original article there, Josiah?
Yeah, well, just before we get to Katrin's piece, I do want to highlight that I have linked in my piece, and you could find very easily online, a list of back-to-school supply support groups, or a list of back-to-school supply donation experiences that anyone who is needing a new backpack or new school supplies could easily find and go online and, sign up their child for. So I really do encourage parents to do that. If they're in a situation where they think financially, maybe I do want a free backpack this year, then I encourage them to do that because it's a hard road for some people whenever you need those kinds of things. But for Katrin points out that actually, if you have the ability to wait until tax time, you can save a good amount of money on your school supply costs. And that's because Minnesota has 2 things that are really helpful for people filing out their taxes. One is an education subtraction, and one is an education tax credit. And so that education subtraction, that depends on how old your child is. But if your child's in, say, kindergarten through 6th grade, you can get $1,625 off of your taxes. Off of your measured income by the IRS at the end of the year. If you're in 12th grade, you started college during the tax year, your maximum subtraction is $2,500.
Wow.
Yeah. And so obviously a subtraction is going to really depend on income, what you have to pay in taxes at the end of the year, but any kind of subtraction is going to be really helpful for people. And so that's just a line on your state tax form, and people just need to know that it's aware. The other thing that people need to be aware of is the Minnesota K-12 education credit, which again is something that you can fill out as part of your state income tax form. And so that education credit, that's going to be a credit to your taxes, as opposed to a subtraction that subtracts money from the income that the IRS considers, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so that education credit, that depends on children. It doesn't depend on children's age. So if you have 1 or 2 if you have 1 or 2 children, then your maximum gross income for that credit has to be about $81,820. So if you have an income that is $81,820 and you have 1 or 2 children, then you can qualify for that credit.
It's it's nice to be able to talk about the positives of which parents can go and take advantage of, and I would imagine that a lot of parents don't even realize that that's the case, that they have opportunities to actually save money every single year as their kids work through the education system. And thank you so much for highlighting that again. Talking with Josiah Padley, policy fellow here at AmericanExperiment.org. I appreciate you coming in early and spending some time on the show, and I encourage everybody to head on over to AmericanExperiment.org and check out her piece, and in the piece is linked to Katrin's subsequent piece as well. Thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Don.
Before we wrap things up on an election day, I do want to encourage everybody to get out and vote if you haven't done so so far. I'll be doing that as I get home later on this afternoon. The wife and I like to go and do it together. Might even bring the dog with us, although I don't think it's happening at the school near my house like it typically is. So I have to go find out, like a lot of other people. So I'll be doing that when the show wraps up today. I got an email yesterday that I wanted to share with you before we wrap up talking about concerns over Somali gangs at the Minnesota State Fair. Tom writes this to john.justice@americanexperiment.org. I wanted to share a viewpoint I've not heard you talk about on the endorsement process. In my opinion, the process is very important The crap, he writes, that happens in the endorsement process has happened forever, according to my father, who has been in the Minnesota politics since the 1950s. He was in his 90s when I asked him about this. He has since passed. If we skip the process and go right to a primary in the state, it gives the other side a say in your candidate. The Democrats tend to have their ticket locked for the most part, giving them an opportunity to vote on the Republican side. The Dems are much more organized in this state than Republicans. So how do we fix it? Good question. Maybe the candidates need to be a little bit more respectful to the process and show some honor. Tells me a lot about the candidates. Kendall Qualls was not my guy, but he will have my vote because he won the endorsement, writes Tom from Rogers. Don't let an outside group have a say in anyone's camp. Just one guy's opinion. Tom, I respectfully disagree. And it's that last statement why I disagree. Because I don't want a group of individuals going to, and I understand the process. I understand how these individuals are selected when they go to the GOP convention and they go and decide who's going to get the endorsement. I get it. There's a process involved, but there's not enough people to give a solid say, in my opinion, as a true representation of who the voters actually go and support. I also don't subscribe to this notion that we are providing Democrats the opportunity of getting involved in our elections if we take everything to a primary. We need to move the primary up earlier in the year. That's what would have to happen, right? This all needs to happen via the legislature. But the number of individuals, Democrats, who would have to cross over to vote, to throw the chosen, who the voters really want as their candidates, I just don't see that as being a viable concern, right? It's nothing until it's something. And in this case, you kind of highlighted the endorsement process has been a mess for a long time. And in my opinion, it should have been removed a long time ago. We've been doing this process for entirely too long. And regardless of whether or not Democrats may go and get involved in the primary process to thwart the actual will of the voters, I personally am willing to take that risk so that we can have a truer representation of who the voters genuinely want than what happens now. And that is somebody ends up getting an endorsement, but potentially has no shot at actually winning if we end up going to a primary, or they end up being the endorsed candidate who ends up going and running in the general election. I think there's going to be a lot of surprises coming out of tonight. I really do. My predictions as far as how this goes, and this is just predictions, not based off of anything tangible. I don't put a lot of stock within the polls, just looking at the anecdotal evidence, hearing the commentary. My prediction tonight, again, not an endorsement, is that Lisa Demuth will end up being the nominee, and it probably won't be as close as people expect. That's my guess. Again, I'm not saying that's who I'm voting for. I'm just saying that's my guess in terms of Republicans and who they end up choosing to be the nominee for governor. I think Michelle Tafoya is looking at a fairly easy win this evening. I don't think that's going to be very close. When it comes to Angie Craig and Peggy Flanagan, I think that Angie Craig actually pulls it out. I think the Democrats are aware that Peggy Flanagan is a more beatable candidate. And because of that, there's going to be turnout for Angie Craig to have her be victorious over Peggy Flanagan over the smallest of margins. So we'll see how things shake out tomorrow. Again, none of that is an endorsement. It's simply just my prediction on what plays out tonight. But if you've listened to my show for any length of time, you know that my predictions usually aren't all that great. What's most important is you need to get out and vote. That's what you need to do. All right, here's what we'll do as we wrap up the show today. As I'm looking at the clock and we're starting to run out of time, I'll save this story for tomorrow and our primary recap show starting at 6 a.m. One quick, I'll give you the summary on this. And again, we'll talk about it in more detail on tomorrow's show. The Minnesota Attorney General's office and the Ramsey County Attorney's office have filed lawsuits to prevent two Somali gangs, Muddy and the Ville. One of the gangs is named Muddy and the other gang is named the Ville. I didn't make them up. From engaging in gang activity at the Minnesota State Fair, the lawsuits allege that the gangs are a public nuisance and have been involved in violent incidents, including shootings and brawls. The lawsuits seek injunctions against the gangs and their affiliates, prohibiting them from gathering and harassing individuals associated with the gangs. I will give you, again, further details on this story, and we'll get to your thoughts on Wednesday's Wednesday show. We'll also be getting into how the DFL's Agriculture Committee co-chair says that Minnesota farmers never had it so good, and he knows this because he sees all the trucks, all the brand new trucks that are at Farm Fest, and says, boy, if the farmers are doing so horribly, then why do they have all these trucks all these brand new trucks everywhere? It's unbelievable. All right, as we wrap up the show today, earlier in the show, we talked about how Hillary Clinton is very concerned about the Republican attacks on the communists that are being elected to run for office across the state. I played this earlier in the morning, and we'll do a replay as we close out the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment. This is an ode to those who have been drinking the communist Kool-Aid. Remember, you can leave a comment on Blast, on the Blaster line at any point between now and tomorrow morning, 612-584-4565. You can also email me, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. Get out and vote today, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. God bless, and we'll have a complete recap of tomorrow, for as much as what we know, tomorrow morning on the show. So I hope you have a fantastic primary election day, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow morning. And now we go out with Communist Kool-Aid.
Country club here, they're passing notes in blue, talking party colors like they're overdue. The old brass on the wall keeps asking what went wrong, but the new crew smiles soft and hums a borrowed song. Now the table's turning slow with a polished patient glow. Everybody in the room feels the courage start to grow. Communism Kool-Aid, sipping by the poolside. Communism Kool-Aid, say it with a straight face. Voters in the cool shade, passing cups around the parade. Communism Kool-Aid, and nobody knows what to say. Hillary's by the phone with a careful, worried look, reading every headline like a line she didn't book. She sees the banner shift, she hears the easy cheer, and the whole old playbook starts to fog up in the rear. Now the table's turning slow with a polished, patient glow. Everybody in the room feels the courage start to grow. Communism Kool-Aid, sipping by the poolside. Communism Kool-Aid, say it with a straight face. Voters in the cool shade, passing cups around the parade. Communism Kool-Aid, and nobody knows what to say. The marina keeps on shining while the arguments roll on. One side calls it progress, one side says the game is gone, and the tide